It was evening and the loud sounds of Indian melodrama could be heard in the house. The cheerful music sounded like a mockery. The wife of Camila's son, the lady of the house, had been doing chores late into the night. Now she was tearfully scrubbing the floors of the spacious four-room flat, and the music that played when they became husband and wife played in her head, and the words of the registrar came to mind. "Do you, Jennifer Johnson, agree to become the spouse of Nicholas Jones?" Why did she say yes? Gave in to her fiancé's entreaties to live with her mother. She put on a wedding ring, and that took her into a dark world of despair. Nicholas, indulging his mother in everything, didn't believe his wife. The miracle had not happened. Husband was not going to support and protect her in a difficult moment, and mother-in-law was dodgy, weaved intrigues, loaded unnecessary work, slandered on the daughter-in-law. Not the difficulties of family life frightened Jennifer. Offended Nicholas misunderstanding, the injustice of life. And today she scrubbed the floors for the second time, only because the mother of her husband did not believe her that she had already cleaned the whole house in the early morning. In the evening, Nicholas supported his mother, not understanding why his wife is stubborn and cannot do simple housework. Finished with the cleaning, Jennifer quietly snuck into the bathroom and closed. Here she could let her feelings out, rest from the family burden. The well-appointed flat, unlike her rural home, was a joy to bathe in at any time, without heating the cooker. It was a small consolation to Jennifer. She missed the peacefulness of the countryside, her yard, the warmth of communicating with the villagers. Picking up the water, with a snow-white cap of foam, she sank into the tub with pleasure. Once again, she remembered the carefree minutes of her unmarried life, and then the acquaintance with Nicholas and such a sudden wedding. Jennifer had fallen in love with the kind guy on a motorbike at first sight. Nicholas then came to visit his grandmother in the village. One day, driving through the village, he saw a marvelous girl with a black braid down to her waist, a gentle look, and a basket in her hands. It was a marvelous vision, as if a forest nymph had come out of the pages of books. She was walking with a basket of cloudberries, which she had been given by a kind-hearted grandmother for a letter from her son. Nicholas stopped, asked to treat him to a strange berry, which he had never seen before, so the relationship began. The guy surrounded his beloved with care and invited her to live in his luxurious four-room flat. Jennifer immediately disliked Camila, the city's spoiled woman, who did not like her son. Not one of her son's girls, she had worn out her cunning, and here was a gift from Nicholas, a simple girl from the village, an orphan from Kazan with no family and no tribe. Jennifer buried her parents long ago and lived poorly, alone. She worked as a postmistress, but at the insistence of her husband, she resigned and moved to the city. Why? What for? There was a persistent knock at the door. Camila's irritated voice brought her out of her blissful memories. "Jennifer, you're at it again. How many times have I told you not to shut the door, and how many times can you pour water? You haven't brought a penny into the house yourself. She's a madam, but she takes a bath every day. Open the door immediately, I have to go to the bathroom. I have a scheduled beauty treatment." "Mum, what's wrong?" asked Nicholas, who came running at the screams. "Your wife did not wash my room, I had to do it myself, and I have a backache, I feel sick. The medicine is in the bathroom, I've been trying to persuade her for an hour and she refuses. And she was rude to me. Talk to your wife." "Why are you sassing me again, Mum? It's been 15 minutes and I've scrubbed the floors in every room." "No, look at you, you arrogant liar. Get out of my sight." Camila shoved her sister-in-law viciously in the side, causing her to almost fall over. Jennifer, Nicholas said coldly, "Stop arguing with your mom and show her some respect, please. If it's not too much trouble, Your Highness." He turned and walked away, stomping angrily. Day after day, her husband's mother nagged, making up tall tales, complaining to Nicholas about her deteriorating health, with such an ungrateful daughter-in-law. Jennifer baked pies, cooked French and Italian dishes, studied new recipes, watched videos on running a household. Nothing helped. The mother-in-law's main goal was to drive her daughter-in-law out by any means necessary. Kick her out for no reason, not her status. Nicholas is a prominent lawyer, and her late husband was a prosecutor. There were old connections, important people, not the last people in town. Camila was embarrassed by Jennifer, who didn't know how to handle cutlery, dressed gray, plain, and refused to go to salons. Unwillingness to do her hair and manicure pissed her off. When guests, the mother of the husband politely, but coldly owed her Girowetzia daughter-in-law, telling her not to show anyone in front of her. A year of hard, tedious, joyless life passed. Jennifer took a job in a shop near the house as a clerk. Her husband stopped giving her money at her mother's request. At work, the daughter-in-law rested from the endless reproaches, but at home it became even worse. Now Camila reproached her daughter-in-law for her unwillingness to do household chores. "My dear, you are always at work, and my husband must be fed and looked after. I'll talk to my son so he won't let you get out of hand." "Mom, I do everything. I cook in advance, all my things are in order, I clean up morning and night. What's the fashion in which you insist on quitting your job? I'm ashamed you're working as a saleswoman with a husband like that. I'm ashamed of you. Because of you, Nicholas doesn't even leave me any money for the household, and I still have a house to keep in the village to pay the bills. Oh, Kazan orphan, you don't need to spend our money, you know that. Nicholas buys everything for the house." The arguments upset Jennifer. Later, the mother of the spouse reprimanded her son, as boorishly communicates his wife does not hear her advice. Jennifer was deeply hurt by Camila's words that she was ashamed of her uneducated daughter-in-law. It was painful to remember why she never went to college. Jennifer was the pride of her parents. She graduated from high school with honors and planned to enter the medical academy. But a month after graduation, her parents were in a car accident on their way back from the city. Father died in the hospital, never regained consciousness. Mom fell into a coma. For 6 months, Jennifer traveled to all the hospitals, begging, hoping to save her mother, gave on the paw, begged to appoint an operation. The situation was hopeless. No one could help. Mom never woke up again. Having buried her mother, Jennifer was left an orphan. To live somehow, she worked part-time in a shop, then found a job at the post office. The road to the academy was closed. There was nothing to pay for her studies. Jennifer spent all the money she had saved on hospital and funeral expenses. The hard fate did not bother her mother-in-law. She could not allow a homeless girl from the village to run her house. Camila found a new way to get rid of her daughter-in-law. "Nicholas," she told her son, "we need an heir. Why can't your wife get pregnant?" "Mom, it's been so little time. Perhaps it's too soon to talk of children." "My dear, a child will help reconcile us all. It's such a blessing. I'll be so happy if you give me a grandchild." The cunning mother-in-law cried and hugged her son. "Okay, I'll talk to Jennifer. However, I agree, it's up to me." In the evening, Nicholas pleased his wife with his desire to have children. He didn't say anything about his mother's request. Camila went to extreme measures, which became known later. Jennifer rejoiced at the possibility of becoming a mom. A child could really soften her husband and her life would be much happier. She had lived with the dream of having a child since her wedding, but it had not been possible to have children. Another 6 months passed. Jennifer cried as she held the test strip in her hands, disappointed again. Fear settled in her soul. Her mother-in-law would scream, her husband would support her mother and slam the door angrily. For the 2nd month, he was less often at home. He stayed late at work, met with his mates. Camila was pleased. She had finally broken up the young people. There was one last step to take. One day, Jennifer entered the room and saw Nicholas, who sat with a twisted face of anger. When he saw his wife, he swung round and hit her in the face. "Ungrateful bitch," he shouted and threw a packet of pills at her. "How dare you lie to me and Mom? Explain to me, what are these?" "They're pills, but I've never seen them before." Crying with shaking hands, Jennifer read the instructions. They were birth control pills. The weight of the past months of endless humiliation, of frustration, came over her in an instant. She collapsed without feeling, no longer wanting to live and breathe in this cruel world of absurdity. Nicholas, though angry at his wife, felt guilty, could not bring her to her senses himself, called an ambulance. Camila snidely looked at the pills and indifferently escorted her daughter-in-law to the hospital. "Mom, why did she do this to me?" bitterly complained Nicholas, complaining to his mother. I told you. The hunchback will be corrected by the grave. Do not dare to forgive such a thing, divorce." "You can't do that, Mama. I promised her she'd be happy, but she lied to me too. I'm going to get up early in the morning to visit my wife and have a quiet talk." 3 days later, Jennifer was discharged. She took the bus home. Nicholas did not meet her. He was at work. Waiting for her at home was a suitcase and a note from her husband informing her that they were getting a divorce. Her mother-in-law was triumphant. She kicked Jennifer out without letting her wait for her husband. She was a country bumpkin, and she was still a country bumpkin. You shouldn't have messed us all about. Get out. I can't see you, you snake. You wanted to separate me from my son. It won't happen. Get out. I said get out. I want you out of here right now. The mother-in-law shouted after her, unwilling to stop her anger and triumph at the same time. In the evening, Nicholas learnt that his wife had left. Mum, why didn't Jennifer wait for me? How dare she leave me? Why didn't she say anything? Calm down, son. It was her decision. Camila was careful not to mention the note she had written, copying her son's handwriting. But how? She didn't even leave a note. You two haven't been getting along for a long time. That woman is not good for you. Who's that redneck going to give birth to you? And without children, there's no family, it's an omen. If she did, who would she give birth to? There's no reason to breed without a native simplicity. Look for a wife of status. Having got rid of her daughter-in-law, Camila felt over the moon. She had achieved her goal. It was her plan. For a year, she drank Jennifer a decoction of wormwood, convincing her that this tea was good for women's health. So she hoped to make a young, healthy girl infertile, and then planted pills on her. Nicholas was upset, he thought. Jennifer hadn't forgiven him for the slap. With a longing in his heart, he walked around the room where he smelled her perfume. Sitting down on the bed, he went through the pills. A suspicion crept into his soul. The packets were intact, every single pill in place. Perhaps Jennifer hadn't taken them. He remembered hundreds of moments when his wife had cried and complained about her mother and he hadn't believed it. The load at the opening struck his heart with the pain of irretrievable loss. He himself, with his own hands, had destroyed love. There is no forgiveness, but Jennifer, his beloved, without whom so lonely and dreary will be able to understand. He would rent a flat for her, and tomorrow he would go to the village to beg forgiveness. An Indian song was playing loudly in the next room. Camila smiled blissfully in triumph. She was more at ease when others were suffering, but her carefree life would not last long. One day she would receive a letter that would turn her whole life upside down, change her character, teaching her to be compassionate, to empathize, to do good. And now she was far from even a moment's regret for her dastardly deed. Nicholas did not immediately get out to the small town where his wife lived before marriage. He had to see the client's case through to the end. A week later, he took a week's holiday and went to see Jennifer. As 2 years ago, to go decided on a motorbike to return the former feelings. He did not inform his mother about his departure. He was offended by her. He tried to avoid talking to her. Camila looked anxiously at her dejected son, hoping that time would heal him. She was already looking for a worthy match for him, an obedient socialite who will distract her Nicholas from sad thoughts. His mother repeatedly tried to talk about divorce, but the son waved away, avoiding an answer. Nicholas settled everything, packed his rucksack secretly from his mother and left the house. It was a clear spring day. Johnson happily set off on his long-awaited journey. Soon he would meet his beloved, whom he missed incredibly. It seemed to him that just today their family would open a new page of life. They would be happy, for he loved Jennifer so much. The road was slippery from the past rain. Prudently, Nicholas wore a helmet, but the wheels could fail. But it did not stop the desire to impress his wife, to revive pleasant memories, move the voice of reason. Johnson accelerated, feeling a rush of energy, freedom and lightness on his soul. It was a 2-hour non-stop drive to the small town. The road went without tarmac, not a living soul. After an hour and a half, Nicholas carelessly slipped into the oncoming lane. At that time, a tractor appeared from behind the corner. It was too late to brake. Nicholas jerked the wheel to the left. The motorbike rammed the bushes, crashed into a tree. The brakes did not work. The wheels began to slip. Johnson was thrown out of the saddle, and he rolled down the slope from the road. He was unlucky with the driver. The driver of the tractor was ex-prison inmate Kevin Reed, who would not want to be investigated again. He braked, hoping to save the arrogant driver, but Nicholas showed no signs of life. So Kevin took his belongings, got back on, and drove off, leaving the motorcyclist to die. In the village, he said nothing about the accident, not even a twinge of conscience. It was an accident. The fault of the tractor driver was not really his fault, and humanity, unfortunately, is inherent in few people. The mother missed her son the same day. She found out that he had taken a week's holiday and did not answer the phone. What a stubborn man, he went to his simple girl. Did she cast a spell on him? Camila knew where her daughter-in-law lived before her marriage, but she was not going to her. She decided that she would bear it for a week, and then she would see. She called her mother in the village and asked if her grandson had turned up. He hadn't. Her son's phone became unavailable, and after a week he still hadn't returned. She decided to go to the village herself, got to her mother, whom she rarely saw and communicated with even less often. The news was shocking. It had been a year since Nicholas had visited his grandmother, called Mrs. Cassandra. He hadn't come to the village a week ago, not yesterday, not the day before. "Do you know Jennifer, the postmistress?" Camila asked her mother. "She's your sister-in-law, your dear. Have you gone completely out of your mind?" The mother was silent, shaking her head. Something sly slipped into her gaze. "Jennifer hasn't been here in a year. She's moved in with you." "How?" "She's been divorced from my Nicholas for a fortnight. What better place to go than back home?" "She hasn't been here. We're next door to each other, 2 houses down." "Camila, don't make a mess. I know you." "Where did you put the kids? They ran away from you, didn't they? They did the right thing." "I raised a bad daughter. You don't come here, you don't help your mother. If it wasn't for Nicholas, I'd be all alone." "Mama, you never understood me, and I couldn't stand that simpleton. What use is she?" "I'm sorry, but I was raising my son. It was hard. He's back on his feet. He hasn't forgotten anyone, and he's my son. I raised him that way." "So you survived, Jennifer? I see you're a simpleton like me, or you've forgotten. What a character you have, Camila. I'm ashamed to have raised a daughter like that. Tell me what happened. Why did the kids run away from you?" "My son went to Jennifer's. I guess his motorbike isn't in the garage." "Where did it go?" "I don't know. I'm so sad." Camila couldn't hold back any longer. She clasped her hands and wailed. "Sonny, where are you, dear son? It's my own fault. My own fault. Let's go to Jennifer together. Maybe they're lurking there, living there. I'll tell you the address, but it's no use. I won't go. Go yourself and don't come back to me alone. It's easier and calmer. You go yourself, I'll call you if the children are found." Camila went to the address, but no one was home. She knocked. She went to the neighbors, but it was the same. Neither Jennifer nor her husband had been there for a year. Nobody had come or knocked. Camila went to the old habit to collect information in the town, in the shop, at the post office, at the club, but Jennifer as in water vanished. With a heavy heart, she returned to town, the trail broken. Acquaintances, friends didn't know where her son was. He never showed up for work. He didn't sign any resignation papers. Nicholas was irretrievably missing. The last desperate step was to file a missing persons report. Another year, she padded the thresholds of government agencies, visited her mother in a small town. There was no trace of her son. Later, remorse seized Camila. Nothing could dull the pain of loss. It was impossible to believe in the death of her son. So she lived lonely, remembering the moments when everyone lived together, though not always friendly. Let him live with that simple girl, as long as he was near. Now the house was hopelessly silent. Camila cried at the window all day long with an absent look, but she believed that her son would return. The story by the roadside had a sequel. Nicholas survived. He was rescued by the family of a healer from a small town in the neighborhood where Jennifer lived. It was a very small town of just a few houses. The only people left in it were old people. For all the necessary food things, so small things for the household drove and went to the neighboring town. On that fateful day, the daughter of the healer went to the shop on the road. First she saw a mangled motorbike, and a little further away she noticed Nicholas without feelings. What a grief, he must have crashed. What a handsome man he was. I sighed and shook my head. The girl, her name was Catherine, was trained in first aid, often helping her mother treat people. She checked and realized that the boy was alive, but it was not customary for healers to call an ambulance. They lived in the village as one family. In case of grief, they helped each other. So Catherine ran off to get help. Johnson was taken to Chloe's house. It wasn't good. The victim hadn't been conscious for a week. They searched around the motorbike, but they didn't find any ID. phone, or belongings. They were taken by a resourceful tractor driver so that there would be no trace of them at all. He just took the things, but he burnt all the papers and even his passport. There was a man, and he's gone, missing. The unknown man came to his senses on the 8th day. A black-eyed beauty with a thick red braid was sitting beside him. When she saw that the sick man opened his eyes, she jumped up and cried out, "Mummy, he's awake, come here." A not young but stately woman came in, bent over him and held his hand. "My dear, you'll live now. Where did you come from? What's your name?" But Nicholas was so weak that he could not speak. He shook his head, trying to say something, but could not utter a word. "Catherine, go and get him some broth and tea. I guess he can't talk. Maybe he'll write something later." The man thought with horror that he couldn't remember his name. Moreover, who he used to be, who he even was, he doesn't know. He frantically fumbled around, trying to get up, mumbled and fell again without feeling. Later, he was given tinctures. The men brought his motorbike, collected parts from it, and wanted to identify the man by it, but somehow forgot about it. It's no use, they thought. After all, the village had hardly developed. A kind man, we need him. If he doesn't remember his former life, it's his fate. Catherine nursed Nicholas, fell in love with him without memory. He was also charmed by this extraordinary, caring girl of fabulous beauty. Over time, Nicholas began to talk a little, turned out to be skillful at all hands. Quickly learned to build, put a log cabin for his native Catherine, equipped it, and so they lived together. Vague pictures of the past came to mind, but the whole did not add up. With some secret excitement, he looked at the cloudberries, and then everything was eclipsed, did not go further memory. Nicholas was no longer himself. He was given a new name, Norman, the papers of a long dead man, buried and not registered as dead. Norman Carter was born. For a long time he couldn't remember where he came from, who he worked for, or why he was on that road. Camila Jones was still waiting for her son's return. Her maternal heart told her he was alive. It had been 5 years since his disappearance. Nicholas had been reported missing. The bleak days had been hard. It seemed as if nothing would happen until she died, but one day she received a letter. A very strange message came from Jennifer's address in a small town. There was only one word on a white sheet of paper, Cloudberry. What the hell is this? The mother-in-law shook the envelope, nothing more, shone the leaf on the window a blank. I told you she was a mad fool. The same day I left for the village. The first thing I did was to go to Jennifer's house. She didn't remember her son's story about how he met his wife. This time the door to the house was open and empty inside. She walked through the rooms, as if no one lived there. Dust all around, cobwebs in the corners, the smell of a long, uninhabited house. But in the midst of this emptiness, a brand new portrait of a sweet little girl stood on the windowsill. Camila shuddered and cried, Nicholas's bottomless blue eyes staring back at her. Grabbing the portrait, she read the inscription at the bottom, Cloudberry on the back, Caroline Jones. It couldn't be that. How could it be? For 5 years I've been on my own, with my granddaughter growing up next to me. It was Jennifer, the wicked witch. She's the reason I lost my son and hid my granddaughter. What a bastard. Camila howled as she looked at the photograph, stroked the face that bore the features of her precious Nicholas, and then sat down and wept. Tears of remorse poured down in streams. It was she herself who had driven the good girl away. She had given her wormwood to keep her from being a mother. But what a cruel fate. Jennifer's daughter was given to her, and everything was taken away from her. It's karma. Jennifer was wrong to do that. It was getting dark. There was no electricity in the house, so this was not where her daughter-in-law lived. Camila stood up from the floor 5 years older, her heart bleeding. She walked to her mother's house and the door was open, wide open. No one inside, empty and desolate. She had not visited her mother for a year. She had given up hope of finding her son. She had stopped calling. Her mother had died without her. There's no one now, alone in the whole world. I'm sorry, Mom, I'm sorry. Where are you? Camila clutched her temples and fell senseless. She woke up in the dark. There was a cold smell from the door. She had to find her granddaughter and Jennifer to find out what was wrong with her mother. There was no electricity in the house. She went into the kitchen. Like when she was a child, the candles were in a drawer. I lit them, put a glass, and sat alone in the semi-darkness on the chair where I sat as a small, carefree, mischievous girl 45 years ago. The glare played on the wall, the silence was incredible. The world froze here in an instant, in no hurry, no sacrifice required. What happened to her soul? The city had taken everything good out of her, made her a cruel and wicked girl. And it's not square meters, water from the tap that you need to stay alive. That's the feeling when you realize you're a real person. Only a small town can reveal the soul. Camila should have been born again, sitting alone on that chair, in the semi-darkness, which her mother had not thrown away because she had waited all her life for her daughter's return. In that moment, she came home with her whole soul. Grief helped her to realize the emptiness of her meaningless life. The clock ticked, as if counting down the time of rebirth. Night fell and business had to be postponed until tomorrow. Camila unraveled the prim bump on her head and braided her hair. She woke with the dawn in the morning, anxiously opened the wardrobe in her former room, going through the dresses she had worn when she was young. This was where she had lived until she got married and met a promising guy studying to be a lawyer. Later, they left the small town and bought a one-room flat in the big city. The clothes were too small, no doubt. I slammed the doors, went into my mother's room, opened the wardrobe. Weekend dresses hung in rows. Everything was in perfect order. Even the perfume hadn't weathered off. By old habit, her mother walked around the village only in skirts or dresses. Camila stood in indecision. She dared not take her mother's things. It was not clear what had happened. It was bad enough to wear the things of the deceased, but she would certainly be told that her mother was dead. Emboldened by this thought, Camila chose a plain, straight-cut monochrome dress and changed. The trouser suit she'd arrived in was angrily tossed into the dresser, as if a frog had taken off its skin, transforming into a beautiful maiden. In her 50s, Camila was a slim, beautiful woman, but the strict outfits, dark things aged her. Now she was happily fidgeting in front of the mirror, as if rejuvenated a dozen years in this simple old-fashioned dress. It was time to make inquiries, stock up on groceries, put the house in order. I went outside, dizzy from the marvelous country air. I stood enjoying the ringing silence. I went into the neighboring house. I thought how I hadn't thought to go to the house since the evening. The old owner was milking a cow. She looked in, startled to see Camila in her neighbor's dress. "Hello, Mrs. Kimberly." "Don't you be sick," too, the old woman muttered quietly. "Tell me, where's Mummy?" "It's fate to die with a daughter like that." "No way." "You, my dear, don't deserve to know the truth," said the neighbor harshly, turning away. "Tell me, I beg of you, is she alive?" Mrs. Kimberly stood up, picked up the milking pan, and strode to the porch. The silence dragged on. "Now, you get out of here. I've nothing more to say, and don't come here and say anything more. It's up to you to decide how you want to live your life. Michael, get Blanca out of here and get this one out of here too." She mumbled under her breath, but Camila heard her. She didn't get anything else. Michael, the neighbor's son, passed by without a glance and didn't speak. Camila stood there for a moment, crumpled, and then walked angrily away. She passed 5 other neighbors, 2 of whom had already left the small town. The houses were padlocked, the vegetable garden abandoned in high summer, everything overgrown with grass. The other 2 neighbors she knew couldn't explain anything. She said her mother had moved away. She didn't say where. But the small town was thriving. A new shop had opened. People were farming, putting the cattle out to pasture. The hospital was working. There was a poster on the local notice board advertising a holiday home by the river. Inquiries from the inhabitants led nowhere. Camila decided she had to start her life over. It was no coincidence that she received a strange message. A portrait of her granddaughter, changing will earn her forgiveness. Fate would have mercy on her. She decided to start with a temporary move. The flat in the city was on the alarm system. But she didn't have to worry. But she didn't take any things with her. Her old tastes seemed unacceptable for the town. Camila Jones went round the shops, bought suitable outfits for work and everyday life. She spent the rest of the evening tending to the household, going through the kitchen utensils, all in a deplorable state, some chipped, some old, the floors cracked, the wallpaper unchanged for years. Now she realized what a poor state the house was in need of repair. She had not thought about it, having left her mother alone in the village. She only threw in a piece occasionally, sending money a couple of times a year. How did mother live here alone was unfathomable, and a bitter thought befell the neglectful daughter. What if her son had left her so alone? Would life have been easy? Her heart was troubled. How could she do that? No, she deserved everything that happened to her. You can't be selfish, thinking only of yourself. Things are going to be different now, she proclaimed into the void, wiping away her tears. She cleaned the house until evening, made a list of things to buy in the city. I thought I'd go to the local office to find out when my mother had last paid the light bill. It turned out that it was only like 3 months ago. The bills were paid. The landlady herself came to visit. Camila was wary, but the payment was accepted, and in the evening the electricity came on, illuminating the rooms with a cold, dim light. In the morning, Camila left for the city. She drove her car to the village, leaving it at the gate for the night. But after thinking a little, she went to her neighbor's house, sneaked into the house, knocked. It was open. The house was clean, spacious, everything was in order. It seemed that her son had done his best to repair the house, and it stabbed her heart that she herself had never helped anyone. The angry landlady was about to send her away. "Mrs. Kimberly, I'm sorry I've been mean. My bad. What a sly fox. I won't tell you anything. Just so you know. You're right, it's too early to forgive. Mother, I must find my son and granddaughter in front of them guilty. So why did you come to me? Go back to your place. Nobody needs you here. I decided to live here for the summer. I was invited," she muttered quietly, remembering about the letter. "What do you want from me?" "I'm going to town, to the hardware store. I want to make repairs to my mother. I came here to ask if you need anything to buy." "Buy them all. Have you decided?" Mrs. Kimberly grinned slyly. "It's out of the goodness of my heart. What can I do for you?" "Oh, my dear, I can't pretend to be angry for long. Come to me, I was babysitting you while your mother was at work." To her amazement, all Mrs. Kimberly's sternness was gone. She hugged Camila, wiping away her tears. "I'll write you a list, and I have to ask my son. He wanted to go into town too. Maybe he'll come with you." Mrs. Kimberly's son was a little older than she was. As children, they were friends and quarrelsome, annoying each other with mischief. At 15, Michael left his mother, going to school to study electrician, and then returned here to find a job, got married, made an extension to the house. We started a household and lived together. How painful it was for her mother to see it. Her daughter got married and never came back. "Hello, Michael." Camila finally found the right words. "Hi, Meanie." Michael smiled, remembering her past offenses. "I'm going to the city. Your mother has made a list. Maybe you should come with me too? You're not going to kill me?" The irony was uncalled for. When she was a child, she asked to drive his motorbike, but she lost control, drove off a bridge into a river. They were rescued, but the motorbike was banned. Michael didn't forgive her and stopped communicating altogether. He'd do little things, like scare me with caterpillars or drop off mice. "Don't worry, I've been driving for over 20 years. When my husband gave me a car for my wedding, I learned right away." "Did you bury your husband?" "My mother told me. Sorry to remind you." "It's all right. Where's your wife?" "She died. She went out on the ice in the spring. She wanted to rinse the laundry. It got sucked in. She was not saved." Michael said quietly and turned away. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. It was a long time ago. Let's go to town. Wait, I'll change." While Michael was getting ready, a girl with a bag over her shoulder ran up to Camila. "Hi, do you live in this house?" "Yes, I'm here to see my mother. Here's a letter to this address. Please sign here." "Thank you, girl. Come and visit if you have time. I've got to go. Goodbye." Camila Jones turned the envelope round. It had her mother's address on it, but it was addressed to Camila. She opened it anxiously, wondering if someone was trying to teach her a lesson or take revenge. On a white sheet of paper in large letters was the single word wormwood. Camila shrieked, dropped the sheet. Jennifer learned that by the evil machinations of her mother-in-law, she could have been left infertile. How could that be? Maybe she peeped on her while she was in the kitchen making her daughter-in-law's herbal tea. "What are you standing there with your mouth open?" Michael asked, approaching. Seeing the leaf, he picked it up, reading the strange message with amazement. "What is this nonsense? Did you get a letter? Your interlocutor is obviously a little verbal." Michael laughed, but quickly stopped. Seeing that, Camila stands in a daze with a lost look. Let's go." The road was silent, not even music on. Michael was dozing in the passenger seat. Then he opened his eyes and blurted, "Your mom came to see us a week ago." "What?" Camila braked sharply, which almost bumped Michael's forehead. "Hey, take it easy. Drop me off. I'd rather walk. You're not very good at driving." "I'm sorry, but why didn't Mrs. Kimberly tell me? I was so worried. Do you know what I've been through? I buried her in my mind." "Don't shout." "What's going on?" Camila said it quietly and pulled over to the curb. "I don't know. They were whispering in the kitchen without me, and my mother forbade me to talk about it. Don't ask me anything. I'm going to go. We're here." "Wait. I'll find out for myself. Don't say anything. Let's go." The shopping trip took longer than they thought. It was getting dark by the time they'd filled the boot in the back seat. Camila persuaded Michael to spend the night in her flat. He walked round the rooms for a long time with a look of amazement. "It's like a museum. What a place. You must have been crazy to live in the country. The living room alone is as big as your mother's house. Yeah, Mom's living in squalor and her daughter's living in luxury." "Michael, I know what I'm talking about. Come on. Here, you're going to sleep on the couch. Let's go. I'll feed you. Caviar and lobster. I'm coming." "Ugh, you furry hedgehog," she playfully replied with a childhood nickname. Camila thought that it was unbearable to live alone. Caring for others gave her energy. Michael was pensive, looking at his hostess with alienation. The evening was not going well. The guest was obviously hiding something from her, but Camila Jones did not question him, more him. The letters were leading her to some goal, like stages of a test she had to pass. Michael got up in the early morning and got Camila up. He would not leave his mother alone for long. He had to help with the chores. They came back when the neighbor had already put the cow out to graze. "Why didn't you come back yesterday?" "Every hour counts. I can't cope on my own, and it's scary to spend the night alone." She grumbled, then smiled and invited me to tea. We unloaded the shopping. Camila had brought a set of pots and pans as a present for her neighbor. She knew that pots and pans were the trouble with village housewives. Mrs. Kimberly sighed but accepted the gift. The hut was clean, cozy, and warm. The hostess brewed tea, put a wicker with lambs, jam, and honey. The quiet morning in the village was peaceful. Camila took a sip of tea and looked at the hostess with bewilderment. "Something bitter?" "It's bitter for you. Others must have been sweet, remember." "Is it with wormwood?" She choked and coughed up tears. "And you eat it with cloudberry jam. It won't be so bitter," Mrs. Kimberly said with a sly squint. Camila shuddered. Tears ran down her cheeks. She jumped up, ran out without looking at anyone, and ran away. Earlier it was impossible to be pierced by this. Nothing troubled her heart. She did harm to her daughter-in-law with a light hand. But now her conscience, which had been sleeping for many years, awoke and stirred her soul. She sat on the bench at the gate and could not calm down for a long time. There were no more thoughts, only tears flowed unrestrainedly, washing away the blackness that lived in her soul. Granddaughter Caroline was to relieve the bitterness of life. A little while later she went to sort out her things, then fiddled in the kitchen until evening, took everything out to the veranda, painted both the ceiling and the walls, having changed her mind about wallpapering. She just cleaned the floors, and contrary to village tradition, laid a carpet. The old kitchen furniture was falling apart, in need of repair. She persuaded Michael to help, who willingly patched the holes. Camila looked at Michael with admiration. He's a good man. In his 50s and early 50s, he's still a handyman. Michael laughed at the carpet and told her to paint the floors. "Help me set up the furniture. It's up to me to decide what to do. City folk, you're all cuckoo. Oh, for crying out loud. All right, I'll keep the carpet for now, and I'll paint the floors later. You're going to throw that carpet away in 3 days. We'll watch you when you're on the river. I bought a Hoover you've never even heard of." Michael looked at Camila in a friendly way, jokingly pushing her, looking playful. "Oh, Michael, stop pushing me. We have grandchildren to nurse." "God didn't give me grandchildren." He said bitterly, "My son is a border guard. He won't show his nose. It's been 10 years since we've seen each other." "Son? I don't know anything about you. I don't know about anyone. I only cared about myself. After my mother died, he cut off all contact with us. He left like a ghost. He writes letters once a year. He settled down all by himself. He got a flat far away from us, but he didn't have a family. In an outburst of pity, Camila hugged Michael, and he suddenly responded, embraced her and kissed her on the lips. Camila was taken aback. "Have you eaten too much white wine in your old age? You know nothing. And I was in love with you as a child, and you city crazy first attacked me." "Me? I don't need any more help from you. I'll see you around." Michael turned and walked away. He muttered to himself, "That's right. You're the one who's trying to teach me a lesson." "My what?" "Wait, spit it out. You can't talk." Michael walked over to Camila, kissed her again, and left quickly. Camila Jones stood in a daze for a minute, then sat down to drink tea in the newly transformed kitchen, the surroundings sparkling clean. Michael had hung the chandelier she'd looked out for in the house, the pendulum clock on the wall, adding to the coziness. Only the old furniture spoilt the overall impression. So the furniture was worth updating. You could order yourself new sofas, a lounge, an armchair, a bed for Mum. How easy were these things to do now? Why hadn't she thought of Mum's comfort before? For a week, Camila made repairs, ordered furniture, while waiting for delivery, painted ceilings and walls. For more than 10 years, she had been sitting on the sofa with soap operas, and now she was working, impressing the neighbors with unprecedented vigor for a mature woman. In the evenings, her back and arms ached, but Camila did not complain. She was patient, glad that God had given her the strength for such an important work. During that week, Michael visited her more than once, helping with the repair of wardrobes, rearranging furniture. Camila got used to him. Communication became warm. More and more often he sat up late, remembered the past, made plans. Michael refused to talk about her mother. At parting, he hugged her like his own, but he did not allow any liberties, kissing her innocently on the cheek. On the 8th day, the renovation was finished. The old kitchen sets were dismantled for firewood. For her mother, she had chosen a color that was not stained, a pleasant shade of gray that gave the kitchen a new glow. With new furniture and fluffy carpets, the house began to play with magical colors. Having put all her energies into renovating the house, Camila exhausted her energy, fell asleep on the new sofa, and woke up to a knock at the door. The postmistress came. The game was dragging on. The relatives sent a parcel. She opened it anxiously. This time there was no message, just 2 jars with some contents. I opened them carefully and tasted. Wormwood and cloudberry are the same thing. It's a vicious circle. I chose the right path a long time ago. I renovated my mother's house. I realized what I'd done to my family. I lost my son. Tell me, haven't I suffered enough? Is it too soon to forgive me? It's too soon. You don't understand. You didn't lock the door, did you? They'll steal my beauty. You scared me. Camila shuddered. The door. What nonsense. What didn't I realize? You have to close the door. That's not what I meant. You just said that. I didn't say anything else. Are you all kidding me? No one. You're the one who did all the renovations. You don't want to talk about it. Go on. Don't make a mess. I just came by to help us with the housework. My mom asked me to. All right, I'll be back in an hour. Michael staggered a bit and went out. Camila cooked breakfast in her head, solving the problem she'd been given. If Jennifer knows of her intrigues, then Camila must go through it too. First to feel the bitterness of life, and then there will be hope in the distance and Hope and Cloudberry, her granddaughter. Camila twirled the jar of wormwood infusion, thought, and drank it down. She choked, drank water, and collapsed. By evening, Michael found Camila lying in the kitchen, sound asleep. There was no way to wake her up. He brought her to the hall, put her on the sofa. She looked charming in her sleep. He decided to stay close to her, to wait for her to wake up, so he locked the door. He walked to the kitchen. His eye caught a jar with some kind of potion on the bottom. He smelled something familiar, remembered the inscription in the letter he'd received recently, Wormwood, and thought that Camila's mother had overdone the punishment, but he wouldn't interfere. Let things take their course. They say that Camila herself has been scheming against her daughter-in-law for a year and a half, playing her with her fate and her relationship with her son. He switched off the light and lay down on the bed in the bedroom. Fell asleep quickly, in a sound, farmer's healthy sleep. Camila woke up when it was dark outside the window, surprised that she had no memory of the previous day at all. She opened her eyes and squealed in horror. A dark silhouette stood on her doorstep. She ran to the bedroom, closed the door, sighed, looked at the bed, the scream stuck in her throat. In the semi-darkness, she could see Jennifer sitting with her legs overhung, threatening her with her finger, whispering that she had ruined her unborn children. Jennifer. Jennifer, I'm sorry, for God's sake, it's all my fault, don't hold it against me. An ominous silence was her answer. When Camila looked up in fear, she saw that there was no Jennifer, but a man sleeping on the bed. She jumped up, her temples pounding, her head spinning. She listened, silence, only sniffling. Camila looked out into the living room. No one was there. Switching on the bedroom light, she breathed a sigh of relief. Michael, you scared me. But he was sleeping soundly as a baby, not waking up from his screams. Camila switched off the light and went into the kitchen. There was someone standing at the doorstep. A dark silhouette walked quickly towards Camila. Dazed with horror, she skidded back into the bedroom. But there stood the mother, with an angry expression on her face, moved her whole body, approached, threatened with a finger. Why have you ruined the children, you foolish daughter? She spoiled everyone's life, she herself is in silk. But she didn't think about her mother. Mummy, don't. I'm sorry, don't swear, I'll fix everything. Everything will be different. Her mother had almost reached her and stretched out her hands. Then Michael woke up. He saw Camila, who looked into the void and whispered in madness a plea for forgiveness. Camila, what are you doing? Camila finally saw that there was no one in the room but Michael. His shout made her eyes clearer, but the fear remained.
There's someone in the corridor.
Why did you drink wormwood last night? You can't have visions. Wormwood doesn't give you visions. Something's been spiked, that's what it is. And you can have the second jar. Camila flinched. Jennifer was talking to her. Cloudberries. Eat some cloudberries. Oh my God, it was Jennifer again. My head hurts. It's impossible. Let's go to Mum. She'll tell you what to do. Take the jar. Camila obediently got ready. She could still hear someone else's footsteps in the house. Shadows seemed to lurk in the corners. She fumbled, grabbing Michael by the arm. Has your mother let you go yet?
Just out of sleep, I think.
Mrs. Kimberly took the jar, sniffed and laughed. Well, darling, you'll be dreaming of things for a long time to come. Grebes for grebes, they should have called it. The neighbor laughed again, but sat her guest down. She fiddled with the herbs and poured some fragrant tea. Here, drink it. It'll make you feel better. You probably have a headache. Thank you. I hope it doesn't make me feel better.
If you don't want to drink it, get out of here.
Why are you being so strange, Mrs. Kimberly? You're always pushing me around. Now you're helping me. Camila, remember the basic truth. You can forgive anything, but you can't atone for the guilt of an innocent child. Camila to the house saw Michael, said that today with her babysitting will come in the evening. The woman entered the house anxiously, not noticing anything suspicious. Her head felt heavy, and she wanted to sleep. She fell asleep quickly, barely putting her head on the pillow. She woke up to her family's voice. Hello, daughter. Her mother was sitting on the edge of the sofa. Mum, hello, how I missed you. What a beauty you've made. I wish I'd done it before. It would have been so nice. Mum, I'm sorry, Camila cried, tried to get up but couldn't. She struggled on the sofa, opened her eyes, the cushion was wet. There was no one in the house, it was just a dream. But Mum, we'll meet for real. I'll change everything. My head was still heavy, dizzy, my temples ached. I went to the kitchen, took a jar of jam, twirled it around, tasted it by machine, struggled to do housework. After tidying up, she decided to cook something tasty, make some pies to treat Michael to in the evening. She had a secret sympathy for her neighbor. She felt at ease with him, as if he were her own. After an hour, she was surprised to note that her head was gone and her consciousness was clear. A burst of strength and appetite reminded her that she had quite recovered. Cloudberries helped. For after tea, Mrs. Kimberly had dreams. Camila was starting a new phase of her life, determined to find something to do so she wouldn't sit idle. She used to work under her husband in the prosecutor's office as a secretary. Together with Nicholas's father, they had made a fortune and become respected people in the city. But now Camila realized that no luxury could replace family. The longing for her son, the desire to see her granddaughter and meet her mother became the main value of her life. It was getting dark. Camila cooked some goodies and waited for Michael's arrival, and then, angry, decided to go to bed. There was a knock at the door, but instead of her neighbor, a girl came in and slipped her an envelope and disappeared. This made Camila completely angry. She wanted to throw the letter away, but she relocated herself, sat down and printed out the message. Many roads lead to redemption, but unfortunately not all of them are peaceful. Sounds like a threat. Came a man's voice over the top of her ear. Who's there? Camila shrieked in horror and jumped up sharply. Scaring you is my job. Michael laughed, genuinely laughing at his hostess. Did you do that on purpose? And I baked you pies, you will not get a single one. Get out of here. I'm an old woman. I have nerves, I have a weak heart. If I don't live to see my son and granddaughter, you'll be responsible for this sin. You know that, mark my word. You cursed me. You should close the door. What's the fashion? She came like a witch. I'll go to bed, mad woman. Wait, sit down, eat. Woof. What are you doing? You're giving me commands like a dog. I'm sorry, I was only joking. Bring me your pies. Okay, but don't sneak around again. Next time I'll give my soul to God for sure. Don't be pompous, you've got another 30 years on you. What kind of treatment is that? Don't you have any other words for me? There are, but you'll like them even less. Don't say anything. I can't imagine what's going on in your head. You, Michael said with a sudden change of tone, and then added with a smirk, you, my love, are a pain in the arse. Camila Jones choked on her tea, coughed up tears, wanted to answer something, but instead sat silently, her eyes goggling. Have you lost your mind, you furry hedgehog? The suitor did not expect such a reaction. He wanted mutual recognition, warmth of relations, that she would lower her eyes modestly, take her hand and say that she needed him very much. Indignantly, he jumped up, ran outside, and Camila slumped into her chair. She herself had not expected such a reaction from herself. She was considered a reserved lady. Why did she have the country ways of a silly girl? After cleaning up the kitchen and closing the doors, she lay down. She woke up early, remembered last night with shame, and then fulfilled the promise she had made to herself. Before lunch, she went round the village looking for work. Everywhere they offered only temporary help in the household. Then she resolutely went home and changed her clothes. Redemption, that's what was needed. That's what the letter said. First, she went to Mrs. Kimberly's house to help with the vegetable garden. Then she went round the neighbors to make life easier for the old people. She didn't take any money for her work, and she refused to buy groceries. It was getting dark by the time she got home. Her back was sore from unaccustomedness, but she felt happy. For the first time in many days, she felt proud. As she approached the porch, she heard a rustling behind the house, a dark figure, a vision. She decided to see what was there, but after walking a few steps, she suddenly fell into a hole, hit her head on something hard, and lost consciousness. When I woke up, it was unclear what time of day it was, but it was dark all around. She turned her head and tried to get up, bumped herself, shrieked, felt around. There were wooden walls everywhere, boards on top. She was trapped in some kind of box. A cold, sickening sense of dread filled her. The hopelessness of it scared her deathly. Help me. Help me. Help. Camila screamed and thrashed hysterically. It seemed to her that an infinite amount of time had passed. Her body felt stiff, her head ached, but she took a full breath and calmed down. She remembered the words from the letter, not all roads to redemption are peaceful. It was too much, too much. You can't torture a person like that, you can't. Camila screamed and cried as she climbed to the top. Then she noticed that the lid was sliding. She pressed her hands and head against it, opened it with effort, was blinded by daylight, squeezed her eyes shut, then stood up. Her heart hammered and nearly stopped with terror. She was standing in a grave, in a coffin. It was a cemetery. From the last strength on weakening legs, she began to get out of the grave. At that time, the drunken watchman came running to her screams. When he saw someone climbing out of the grave, he almost had a stroke, but he ran up and managed to push Camila out of the grave. Damned zombie, sit with your ugly face, where your relatives put you. Despair seized the unhappy woman, but she guessed to talk calmly. Granddaddy and Granddaddy, be careful. She called out to the watchman. Oh, it's the evil one. Lord, forgive me. I've sinned. I repent. I swear I'll never drink again. Grandfather, I'm alive. I fell down. I was visiting my family, and here is an open grave. Grandfather, please help me, pitifully pleaded Camila. A cunning zombie, pretending to be a human. He looked into the grave, saw Camila there, in her black work clothes, with her tangled hair loose. Help me, you idiot, you stupid bloody fool. Get me out of here at once. She whispered in helplessness, as if hissing at her grandfather. Holy Mother of God, what a disgrace. The watchman ran away frightened, not stopping to cross himself. Well, and go, you heartless man, go yourself. On the third attempt, Camila got out. The cemetery was deserted. Beyond it, a field, a path led somewhere, but where the village was, it was difficult to understand.
The roads to redemption are far from peaceful.
How did I even get here? How could anyone do this to a living person? I sat down by the roadside, braiding my hair, which seemed deliberately unraveled and tangled. In the ominous silence of the cemetery, thoughts of life and death came to mind. This is the end of everyone's life. How much in us is empty, unnecessary, contrived? The end of one in the grave, damp earth. As long as you're alive, you should not only think about yourself. I wasn't crying, it's just dumbness. There's a path ahead. Does it lead to a new life? I have to go through it. Maybe this is the road that's not peaceful. Mummy, tell me, are you playing games with me? How could you do such a thing? Camila knew the answer. She had forgotten the way to her mother. It was time to go back. That's where the soul would be born again. She mentally forgave for everything. This redemption was important. She would overcome any difficulties and beg for forgiveness. The path led to the road. Only no one passed by. In about 15 minutes, Camila was exhausted. She was thirsty and her legs ached. She sat down on the side of the road and decided to wait for a car. A tractor appeared, and by some fateful coincidence, Kevin was behind the wheel, and he agreed to give her a lift to the village for a small fee. Camila breathed a sigh of relief, then noticed a familiar rucksack at her feet, leaned over and twirled it, horrified to see the secret embroidery on the strap, which she herself had customized for her son, Nick Johnson. Stop this right now. Tell me where you got that from. I found this rucksack on the side of the road. It was a long time ago. I don't remember when. Tell me the truth. Camila went after the driver, slapped him. Kevin didn't stand for it, got out and threw the woman out of the tractor and drove off. Camila Jones made her way to the village in tears. She was determined to find out for sure. There was a glimmer of hope of finding her son. His rucksack is here, so Nicholas has arrived. He and Jennifer are not far away. They're making fun of her. When she reached home, she locked herself in the dark and fell into a heavy sleep. Michael came to her more than once, but could not get through. Camila woke up for the first time late in the afternoon, heated water, washed herself properly, and ate with appetite. Life was coming back to her. The apathy of the last few days had subsided. She got dressed up and took her documents, deciding to go to the neighborhood policeman. Hello, 5 years ago my son went to this small town but never returned. Wait, said the officer on duty. I'll call a neighborhood policeman to you, and you'll make a statement with him. The woman waited for an hour. Then she was invited into the office. Hello, Richard Gray, the district police officer. What do you want to see us about? Camila Jones gave a detailed account of the events of the last 5 years. She described yesterday's incident in detail. She was asked to write a statement, promising to sort out the rucksack. Called in the evening, told to report to the station, refused to search. Kevin Reed showed a brand new rucksack with no embroidery. The house was searched. Nothing was found. A clever bloke figured out what was going on, got rid of the stuff, burnt it in the backyard. Camila did not achieve anything. The trail was broken, but she did not take the statement. The policeman angrily escorted the woman out, stiffly telling her that Nicholas was missing. Camila did not give up. She decided to turn to Michael for help. She needed to nail this Kevin guy to the wall, but the neighbor refused to help. Are you crazy, going to an ex-prisoner with a war? Just take it easy. It'll work itself out. Don't you realize that's my son's rucksack? I haven't seen him in 5 years, and this Kevin Reed guy is obviously making trouble. If you don't help me, I'll go to him myself. No, you can't stop, and anyway, where the hell were you yesterday? Helping out in the garden for free again. Yeah, I was helping out, digging in the ground. She didn't want to say anything so she wouldn't scare Michael. Let's face it, I don't need it. It keeps my mind off my dark thoughts. They stood on the doorstep, arms around each other, as if they were young, with all the burdens off their shoulders. People who had passed the test, forgiven each other for the present and the past. Mrs. Kimberly was calm, but only told him to help with the household chores as before. The new message arrived 2 days after the cemetery. Camila was already expecting it and opened it without excitement. It was a postcard with an invitation to visit the holiday home by the river. Michael took the news calmly. Mrs. Kimberly sighed mysteriously, smiled imperceptibly. They both knew the landlady of this inn. Camila had one last test ahead of her. Michael refused to go with her no matter how much she begged him. He remained adamant. Camila hastily packed, took the invitation card and set off on her journey. The journey was not long, about an hour. The good road changed to a road without tarmac, and it became more difficult to drive. Every now and then the car bounced. Finally, a holiday home appeared in the distance, occupying an impressive space. Several hunting lodges and a 2-story building were located along the river. At the gate, the guard let her through without question. Driving into the territory, she read the name. In bright red letters on the building was written Cloudberry. 5 years ago, Jennifer Jones had found herself on the street because of her mother-in-law's dastardly scheming. The biggest blow was her husband's betrayal. Did not believe, did not support, kicked out as a mean woman. She could not bear it. Her heart was broken. There was no point in living any further. Without a shadow of a doubt, she stepped on the road, but a man who was passing nearby, a second before the irreparable, pushed Jennifer away. She only hit her head, but still went to the hospital. The doctor told the unbelievable news. The girl was pregnant. Only this saved Jennifer from the monstrous pain on her heart. She wiped her tears and decided to live against fate. She did not want to return to her husband. She could not forgive the betrayal. There was only one way back to her homeland, to her native small town. When Jennifer returned, she tidied up the house and cried for 5 days after being locked up. It was worth it to get her life together for the sake of her child. After relocating herself, she drove into town and quit her job at the shop. Camila's mother, Nicholas's grandmother, the same Mrs. Cassandra, met Jennifer at the shop and told her to tell her the truth. They were not only neighbors. Jennifer often helped with the household. Nicholas's grandmother came to visit. The girl became a native for a lonely woman, but Camila did not know it and did not see beyond her nose. In the evening, the pregnant Jennifer could not resist and told Mrs. Cassandra at length what she had been through in the past year and a half. The neighbor wept, unable to believe the meanness of her own daughter. Then the old woman took Jennifer in to help her through this difficult time. The girl got a job in a bakery and managed to help her patroness as well. When Camila came in search of traces of Nicholas and Jennifer, the daughter-in-law was in the next room. She also bribed the people of her town to make her mother-in-law think Jennifer had not returned to the village. Not for a second did the daughter-in-law feel sorry for her mother-in-law, but the news about Nicholas disturbed her. She began her search. The first attempts to find her husband were in vain. 7 months later, Jennifer gave birth to a daughter and named her Caroline. One day, walking on the riverbank, the girl thought how good it is in a small town. From the big city you can rest. After all, it is a very good idea to build a house on the shore, so that in it the inhabitants of the big city could have a rest. This thought she shared with Mrs. Cassandra. To her great surprise, she brought the whole 2 million wrapped in a cloth. Wow, where did you get that kind of wealth? I've been saving, Camila's been throwing money at me like a dog and I can't spend it. She wouldn't show her face to me for 5 years. Only Nicholas used to come round and leave me some money too. I saved up. I wanted to give it to a good cause or a church. I don't need anything myself. Take it. I'm sorry to you. You've suffered because of my daughter. Thank you. It's not just for me. It's for you and a good cause. After consulting a lawyer from the city, Jennifer got a permit and bought a plot of land by the river. The first house came out small. At first, Jennifer didn't think it would be anything worthwhile. She advertised in the city. People showed up, buying places 2 months in advance. A year later, 2 two-story buildings were built, supplemented with hunting lodges. The demand did not fall, and the profit grew. For the summer, Jennifer and her grandmother moved into a cabin built especially for them. All the while, the girl continued her search. She knew that Nicholas never returned home. From work, he was expelled because of a long absence. Jennifer traveled all over the county in search of her husband. Once she remembered the godforsaken farm, Nicholas, who lived under the name Norman, remembered the past and scraps. Once he had easily settled a dispute between men by reciting lines of law that popped up. After that, people began to go to him for minor matters, to secure their property by law, or to register land, to fill out documents. It became clear, not just a guest was sheltered. Over time, Nicholas cooled to his common law wife. An unknown anxiety was troubling his soul. He went to the river all day fishing, wistfully recalled the same village, his grandmother. Pictures of the past life gradually returned to him. Catherine immediately realized that Norman began to avoid her. The stern girl packed her things and returned to her mother. Nicholas Jones has not thought to return that one. Only suffering he brought is indifference. There, in the depths of memories, woke up feeling for the mysterious girl with a basket of cloudberries. He saw her in a dream, walking along the road. Then everything was cut off by a black cloth. So he suffered for another 6 months, remembering the past in fragments. He found out where he was found, and the next day, without informing anyone of his plans, was going to go to his native small town. In the morning, he got up early, got on his motorbike, and drove away. It had been almost 2 years since he had crashed before reaching his destination. Now he knew for sure that this journey had to be completed. That same day, Jennifer arrived at the farm where Nicholas lived. She went round 5 yards before they dared to tell her the truth about the accident. Jennifer was taken to Nicholas's house, but no one was there. The villagers threw up their hands and invited her to visit. She could finally tell who they had sheltered, they in their village. Nicholas pulled onto the road, read the signs, looked around, then stopped his gaze on the cars that occasionally passed by. He remembered, instantly refreshed, the memory of that fateful day when a tractor had driven at him on this very spot. Jennifer, a sharp pain stabbed at his heart. How will you be without me? He guessed that all the misfortunes had befallen them, only because of his own mother. One planted packet of pills and a fictitious note had ruined an entire family's life. Nicholas took a long time to come to his senses, hesitant to continue on his way. He walked between the trees, horrified by the abyss in which he had lived for the last 2 years, as if he had come out of a coma. Finally, he decided to go to his grandmother to comfort her. It seemed to him that an eternity had passed. When he reached his grandmother's doorstep, he ran into the veranda. Towards him, hearing the motorcycle, ran out Mrs. Cassandroy. Both were crying and laughing. "Nicholas, you're alive," I felt, my darling. That you were coming back, that you were alive. Let me look at you. You've grown up. Grandma, you're still the same, don't cry. It's all right. Everything will be different now. How could you torture us like that for 2 years? Didn't your heart tell you? Didn't you feel sorry for your family? I just remembered you today, Grandma. Where's Jennifer? She went to look for you. You don't know anything, Father. She gave me a sly grin and led me into the house. Caroline, come and meet your father. Nicholas saw a little girl looking with clear blue eyes. Daughter. He exhaled and burst into bitter tears again. Kicked out his pregnant wife. For 2 years she was alone without him. The girl shook her uncle's hand and ran off to play. She was brought up by her mother and grandmother. She was too young to understand the complexities of life. Where's Jennifer? Jennifer went looking for you? She's been looking all the time. She went to the farm. Nicholas shuddered as he missed his wife. That fate was confusing them. He decided to wait here for her return and had a long talk with his grandmother. Mrs. Cassandra bitterly told him that not only Jennifer but also his other girls had been turned away from her son by his mother. Camila once even repented in a fit of despair about how she had separated her son from Jennifer, how she had written a letter to her son on his behalf, how she had wanted to make him infertile. Nicholas could hardly believe that his mother had arranged the meanness. A lump came to his throat. In vain, he didn't believe his wife, defended his mother. Because of her, he had almost lost his life, his wife and his daughter. Grandma, you can't let it go. I can't. I don't want to see or know her again. Jennifer returned late at night, approaching the house, saw Nicholas's motorbike, dazed, burst into tears and rushed into the house with all her might. Bursting in, she threw herself around Nicholas's neck because she knew her lover had not betrayed her. Caroline ran to her mother and started beating Nicholas with her palms, afraid that her uncle would hurt her mother. They decided to all live together, but moved into a holiday home, which needed owner supervision. Mrs. Cassandra stayed on, promising to move in with her grandson and great-granddaughter later. The holiday home prospered, growing. Nicholas's help proved invaluable. They correctly registered the property, expanded, wisely conducted business. Nicholas called his daughter Cloudberry and spent all his free time with her. The girl did not dote on her father, attached to him with all his heart. For 3 more years, Nicholas did not want to hear anything about his mother. Time has softened him a little, and he decided to forgive his mother. But only by changing would she be forgiven. Nicholas himself devised a plan of redemption. Jennifer and grandmother accepted the proposal to teach her mother a lesson, not immediately. It seemed too cruel a way to bring Camila to her senses. Come on, Nicholas, Mom's been through enough. 5 years since she lost you. Jennifer, she didn't even spare our future children. Nicholas, I never drank her teas. It was impossible to drink that stuff. Sometimes she switched the decoction, sometimes she poured it out. It was disgusting. What did she use for wormwood? Let her drink the wormwood herself. It was like this. Nicholas had been living at the house of Mrs. Kimberly, a neighbor. When Camila came to the house, the son was in the back room, a few meters away from his mother. He was glad to have her around, alive and well, but changing her character was more important than meeting her. For the time being, Mrs. Cassandra had moved into Jones's house at the holiday base. Nicholas wrote a message, changing his handwriting beyond recognition. He wanted his mother herself to feel a little of what Jennifer had experienced. It didn't seem enough for him to just confuse her. He invented a whole epic of redemption, remorse, separation from his granddaughter, the bitterness of loneliness. The cloudberries and wormwood were also prepared by Mrs. Kimberly, and the wormwood was laced with sleeping pills and hallucinogenic grapes. It seemed unnecessary, superfluous, but Nicholas persuaded his neighbor, as it could do no harm. At the pharmacy, they took a remedy for poisoning, which they mixed into the cloudberries. Nicholas came in the night when his mother drank a decoction of wormwood, worried how she felt. But it turned out that the son only aggravated the situation, scaring the mother to death. The story of the repairs and help stunned Nicholas. It was beyond his plans, but it was a good sign. Camila changed beyond recognition, began dating Michael. The neighbor was against this punishment, but he could not change anyone's mind. He only supported Camila in her troubles. The hardest step for the son was the story of the cemetery, but once he himself cheated death, as if born again, he looked at everything with different eyes. He wanted to make his mother feel the same way. The hole was not deep, but he forgot to put the shovel away. Camila hit her head, but not badly. Nicholas gave her a shot with sleeping pills and took her to a pre-prepared hole in the cemetery. There was indeed a man to be buried there, so the grave was dug. He hastily chipped something that looked like a coffin, more like a box with a lid easily removable from the inside. He had even carefully placed a pillow. Later, Nicholas was horrified at what he had done, but remembering that Jennifer had lived in hell for 1.5 years, and then almost lost a child, he calmed his conscience. He waited anxiously for his mother's return. He knew that the local people would pick her up on the road, the lust for life would take its toll. Camila returned in a deplorable state, and then went to the police station. But Richard Gray knew Nicholas's story, and even befriended him, sometimes using his legal knowledge. He rang Camila's son beforehand and asked what to do. That way Camila didn't find out ahead of time that Nicholas was alive. Perhaps the son's decision to leave his mother in the dark was too cruel. For 3 years he held a grudge. He couldn't forgive. Only Jennifer, P, and Grandma softened his heart. They sympathized with Camila with all their souls, several times wanted to tell her that Nicholas was alive, but did not dare to interfere. The long-awaited moment had come. Camila Jones arrived at their holiday home and entered the main building. There was no one in the lobby. An Indian tune was playing. She looked around, saw the television, and was taken aback. Pictures of her granddaughter, mother, daughter-in-law, and son were changing one after another. Nicholas, she whispered quietly, tearfully. "I'm sorry, Mum." A familiar voice sounded behind her. Camila turned round, saw Nicholas, shrieked and fell senseless. She had to call an ambulance. Later it got worse. They took her to the city clinic. The woman had suffered a stroke. Nicholas could not believe what was happening. Instead of a happy reunion and family reunion, he drove his mother to the hospital. Silenced, Mrs. Cassandra, without a word, packed up, left for her home. The magical transformation of the dwelling echoed painfully in her heart. Her daughter had lovingly furnished it. She had made a miracle with her own hands. The old mother sat on the new sofa, thinking that not so long ago Camila had slept here. "I forgive you, my daughter," she said tearfully. She lay down on the sofa and fell asleep and never woke up again. In the evening, Mrs. Cassandra was visited by Michael as usual, but it was too late. He broke the sad news to the Johnsons. 3 days later, the funeral took place. Half the town gathered to say goodbye. Nicholas and Jennifer cried uncontrollably. Cloudberry screamed loudly, unable to understand why her beloved grandmother had been buried in the ground. Camila was discharged a week later. Still recovering from the blow, she tried to speak, but nothing came out. She could hardly move, mumbled and cried. For the first time, the family lived at Mrs. Cassandra's house. Nicholas nursed his mother, gave her massages, made her do exercises, and in the evenings got on his motorbike and went somewhere. He couldn't forgive himself for the anger he harbored towards his mother. Whatever she was still his own. He himself is just as bad a person. He himself must go on a journey of redemption. His mother's illness, his grandmother's death, and the weight of guilt heaped on his shoulders. Michael came to Camila, took her in his arms, put her in the pram he had bought for her, and they walked together along the river. After 2 months, Camila began to speak and walk on her own. "Michael, I want to go home."
Where to?
"To the city." "And your son, your granddaughter? Are you coming with me?" "How can I leave my mum?" "You'll visit her. We'll get her a helper." Michael was really attached to Camille. After some thought, he agreed. The next day, while Nicholas and Jennifer were at work, they left for the city. Nicholas was informed of the move by Mrs. Kimberly, shook her head sternly, and from then on stopped all communication with him. 10 years passed. The young, beautiful Cloudberry, who was now called Caroline, graduated from high school and entered teacher training college. Over time, Camila thawed out, recovered. In the city, she took rehabilitation courses at the best clinic. For the summer, she and Michael moved to the countryside, visiting Nicholas. Mrs. Kimberly lived in the city for 5 years next to her son. She passed away quietly, with God's blessing, buried next to Mrs. Cassandra. They were neighbors as well as they ever were. The family council decided that Caroline would now live in town like a queen. They entrusted her with the ancestral flat. Michael and Camila sold the house in the village, gathered their savings, and went traveling. There were too many painful memories here. The Johnsons Jr. sold Mrs. Cassandra's house, deciding to leave the small town. They bought a condo in Florida, hired a manager for their holiday home base, and moved in. They visited their daughter almost every month, until she graduated and got a job in their small town as a primary school teacher. Camila and Michael come to visit to see their granddaughter. They traveled all over the United States and then went to live by the sea. Over time, the holiday home passed to Caroline, who remains faithful to the land where she was born. Every summer she comes to the cemetery with a basket of cloudberries to visit her grandmother. Emma remembered very well how her father left the family, trying to take almost everything that could be taken out of the apartment. She then returned quite late from celebrating her friend's birthday and almost fell, tripping over a pile of equipment and things, for some reason piled at the threshold. The girl even thought that someone had gotten into the apartment and was about to jump out into the entrance. But she heard the voices of her parents coming from the large room, which served as both a bedroom and a hall for receiving cheerful companies on holidays. Hastily taking off her boots, hanging her jacket on a hanger and throwing her backpack on the floor, Emma went to find out what was happening. And I found a strange and terrible picture. The parents quarreled as much as never before and did not even pay attention to the daughter who looked into the room. Emma, instead of her adored father, seemed to suddenly see a completely stranger instead. Cruel, screaming, with a pulsating vein in his neck. It seemed that this angry stranger would right now begin to destroy everything in the apartment. But instead, he methodically walked around the room and collected things, without ceasing to swear with his wife. Why did you decide that I was suitable for the role of an idiot? When were you going to tell me the truth? Never. Why were you so sure that I wasn't going anywhere? I thought that I was a complete fool and even stopped hiding my adventures. That's great. Don't think that this will continue. If you file for alimony, you know I will challenge it. Let them do the examination. I now know that all these years I was raising a daughter who was not my own. Emma froze on the threshold, shocked by such strange news. But the girl's mother did not look confused or offended. If she had cried, claimed that a mistake had occurred, and offered to double-check everything, but no. The woman answered her husband no less aggressively. "Oh, Andrew, you made me laugh. He doesn't want to pay child support. Will you demand an examination? Who will you make worse off from this? How are you going to explain to Emma that she is no one to you now? Will your heart not yearn for her? Remember how great you play with her, go skiing, even go fishing in the winter and go in the summer. What? Will you forget all this? Will you throw it out of your head like garbage from a bucket? Good father." I instantly forgot my daughter. So the man furiously threw everything in his hands onto the floor and swung his hand to hit his wife, but resisted and shouted, "Nakin years him. How can I still treat her if she is a clear reminder of your sin? You knew that I wouldn't forgive betrayal. Why then did you force me, although there was a risk that everything would be revealed, to raise someone else's child? Couldn't you wait for me? I went on long flights for the sake of my family. I tried to earn more money so that you wouldn't need anything. When Emma was born, I began to work even more. Why, with a child in the family, you need so much? But now I don't understand why I sometimes didn't sleep for days. It turns out that I didn't have a family. Only the wife is out for a walk and the child she took on the side. Andrew, well, forgive me, it was a random episode. A burst of passion, nothing more. I tried hundreds of times to explain everything to you, but I was afraid that you wouldn't understand. I'm so dread. The man even found the strength to laugh. You're interesting. In my opinion, I had the right to know the truth from the very beginning. Then it probably wouldn't hurt so much now. I quarreled with my mother for your sake. Although she seemed to feel your deceitful nature in her heart, Andrew turned away from Kate so that she would not see the tears in his eyes and noticed Emma frozen in the doorway. The man felt uneasy. He had considered this girl his daughter for so many years that, of course, it was impossible to divorce her overnight. Sorry, Emma, the man said and began to collect the things he threw away. And then, waving his hand, he sat down on the sofa. Blaine didn't know what to say. The girl solved the problem herself. Approaching the man, she sank down on the floor in front of him so that she could look into his eyes and said quiet, "For me, you will forever remain a real dad. So know that when you want to talk to me, I will always be glad." The man could not restrain himself, and in an impulse hugged the girl, whom he had considered his daughter for 14 years, and headed towards the door. Emma heard the head of the family rattling something in the corridor, but did not go out. In general, this situation seemed like some kind of strange, sticky nightmare to the girl. Only when the front door slammed did she dare to ask, "Mom, how come? Why did Dad decide that I'm not his own daughter?" Kate, who smelled faintly of booze, didn't lie. "Oh, but it's awkward to tell your own daughter this. But you seem to be an adult already, so listen, at least so you don't repeat my mistakes. I married Andrew as soon as I turned 18. He had already served in the army and got a job as a delivery driver. One day I brought some goods to the city, to the store where my mother, your grandmother, was in charge at the time, and he saw me. In general, I began to look after him. But both his mother and mine, of course, were against it. They thought that we were not a couple at all. My mother said that with a villager, I would die of boredom. So she declared that he only knows how to talk about the quality of manure, and it would be a shame to even go to the cinema with him, let alone to the theater. But you must remember your grandmother. You were already 10 years old when she left. Do you remember how she didn't mince words? Her grandmother, after whom she was named, was always, as they say, at the parade. But she could roll out a phrase in such a way that there was no wet spot left. Kate took a breath and continued to share a family secret with her daughter. The woman, the mother, who, like mine, also raised a child alone, did not stand on ceremony in her expressions. She called me a city reveler right to my face. She declared that she would not give her blessing for her son's marriage to a slacker. Well, Who and when did young people listen to? We got married, of course. She went to the village. Here I settled in this city apartment. It seemed like we lived nothing. At first, at least, and then money became scarce. My mother refused to help financially. Like the kids themselves, since you already consider yourself such adults that you got married. Andrew's friends told him that cargo transportation was more profitable, and he began to travel. There really was more money. But I'm bored. I then decided to go to the alumni meeting and unwind with one boyfriend who had been courting me since school seemed to turn my head. It seems like he has started to catch up. I'm not saying that I was directly opposed. Well, of course, I had no reason to be proud of myself. It turns out that you really are not his daughter, but your real biological father, by the way, learned from me that you were born. But by this time, he was already getting ready to get married and had no intention of changing anything in his life. So I had to keep lying. His mother, as soon as she saw you tiny, began to insist that you were not their breed. At most, she came to visit several times and made her whole face look as if she had eaten a lemon without sugar, wincing so much that it was disgusting to look at. She never invited me to relax. My mother-in-law could not know for sure that I had cheated on her son, but she was convinced of it, and she didn't need proof. Andrew, I'm sure she was constantly blowing into her ears that you were not his daughter. Yes, apparently she planted doubts in his head, although it took many years. But Andrew has changed for me today, your father. That is, not really, but in general. Xenia began to make complaints to me out of the blue that I didn't take care of the house, that I was returning from work drunk. He began to reproach me for setting a bad example for his daughter, that is, for you. In general, I couldn't stand it in the heat of the moment. Blurted out everything that I had been keeping secret for a long time. Blurted out that you were not his daughter. So stupidly, with your own tongue, you destroyed the fragile balance. What, Emma? Are you going to blame me for not being able to save my family? The girl did not understand what to do. She was drawn to her father, and paradoxically, she also felt sorry for her mother. And it was also incredibly painful that the familiar world was collapsing. In Emma's class, there were many students from single-parent families. They seemed to be trying to pretend that the presence of both dad and mom together was indifferent to them. But the girl still caught the inadvertently manifested notes of envy. Emma was sincerely happy, considering her parents quite happy. Until this evening, her family seemed like a calm haven to her. And now it turns out that there was no idol, total pretense. There was nothing left of Emma's good mood with which she crossed the threshold of her house. It's an unclear, and therefore even more frightening, prospect loomed ahead. Before the court hearing, at which Emma was supposed to be asked which parent she wanted to stay with, Andrew approached her. He did not look the girl in the eyes and said, "Now, when I'm not traveling, I live with my mother in the village. It's cheaper and more convenient. I won't object to the payment of alimony, but you understand that I won't be able to take you in with me. Moreover, you are aware of the whole truth, and I'm afraid you won't find a common language with my mother. I raised you, but for her, you are a complete stranger. So ask the court to live with your mother." Emma flared up, and, without being embarrassed by anyone, shouted, "Man, fuck you with your alimony. And a crazy grandmother who I don't even remember where to go. I don't need anything from you. I'll get by." Kate, who was talking about something a little further away with an acquaintance she had met by chance, jumped up to her daughter and almost ex-husband and took the enraged Emma away from Andrew. The girl, sobbing, asked, "Now let's live without his help. I don't want to see him anymore since he decided to eliminate me from his life." The divorce procedure for Kate and Andrew did not take much time. The court made all the required rulings, and the former spouses began a new stage in their lives. It seems that there were no major changes in the routine because the head of the family was not at home for a long time. But the situation became somewhat nervous. Kate, like many women, after the fateful changes, got a new haircut and began to pay special attention to her appearance. Of course, Emma wanted her mother to be happy. In any case, Emma did not reproach her mother, and she reacted quite tolerantly to the news, which came less than a year after the final point in the family's unhappy history. "In general, daughter, they will come to visit us this evening. Freddie, this is my friend, and his son George. I have 2 requests for you. First, help me clean up. Secondly, I want you to make a good impression on our guests. So don't dress provocatively." With this hopelessly ruined Saturday, a continuous series of troubles began for Emma. Kate literally crumbled in front of the guests, offering to try either a salad or baked meat. The lordly manners of Freddie, who presented the owners of the apartment with 2 pitiful bouquets of 3 tulips each, looking as if they were at least 1,000,000 scarlet roses, infuriated Emma. His son George caused even greater antipathy. He was only a year older than Emma, and with some pride told everyone present that he did not intend to waste time studying at school, and after finishing the 9th grade he would apply to college. Freddie nodded contentedly, listening to his son, and Kate, who always told her daughter that she should definitely get a higher education, also approved of this decision, but at the same time asked worriedly, "Well done, George, but probably in college there is no deferment from the Army." The guy grinned, "So I don't need her. I have chronic flat feet. I'm like my dad." In the middle of the evening, Freddie proposed, and Emma was offended that her mother did not even consult her, but immediately agreed. Probably it would have been easier for Emma to accept the next changes if her mother and Freddie had not decided to settle in the bride's spacious apartment and rent out the groom's home. When the guests, to the girl's relief, left, Emma, clearing the table, asked her mother, "Why did your fiancé and son decide to live with us if they have their own apartment? This is my joy, to make room for the sake of strangers." Aunt Pate was indignant. "No one will crowd you. We will accommodate George in the walk-through room. Your nursery will remain yours, and my room will remain mine." Emma tried to explain her point of view. It still turns out to be some kind of hostel. In my opinion, this is wrong. I can't even walk in my own house without clothes in the heat. Pleasure is below par. If you are interested in my opinion, it would be ideal if this Freddie of yours invited you to live with him. And I can handle the housework here without any problems. Kate was adamant, and then confessed, "We will need money soon, so you will have to rent out the apartment. I'm expecting Freddie's baby." Emma understood that her mother was still quite a young 34-year-old woman, and this scenario was quite predictable. However, the prospect loomed not only of constantly seeing a stranger and an unattractive guy, but also of becoming a nanny. She completely destroyed all the joy that the parent had found her happiness. Freddie, unlike the one whom Emma had long considered her father, did not bother himself with work at all, and most often lay on the sofa. George, to the girl's great joy, did not flash before her eyes for very long. One day, he simply packed his things into a bag and, asking his father for money, "In general, I'm moving to live with a girl. Everything seems to be fine with her. Besides, her parents moved abroad, and it takes me 3 minutes to walk from their house to college. Waddle. All. Don't be bored. Or send money. Kidding. I will come for financial support myself." Kate tried to be indignant, reminding her stepson that he had only recently turned 16 years old, but he grinned brazenly and said, "But you should be jumping for joy that I'm moving out, and not pretending to be a caring mother hen. Besides," the guy nodded at his stepmother's already noticeable belly, "you will soon have noise, screams, and the stench of a child here. Why the hell do I need such happiness?" Freddie did not scold him for his rather impudent approach to his stepmother, but took money out of his wallet and, handing it to his son, muttered kind, "That's it, come on, go, the philosopher has been found." He took the bill handed to him and, picking up his bag, left. Just before the year 2000, problem and possible computer equipment failures were seriously discussed on TV. Emma had a half-sister, and so New Year's Eve spent with friends became practically the last island of calm in the period after my parents' divorce. Emma had fun, sang songs, and desperately hoped that the gloomy forebodings would not come true. However, everything turned out even worse than one might have expected. More than 3 years from the moment the mother brought the bundle with her youngest daughter from the maternity hospital, her eldest got the worst of it. It was Emma who most often changed her sister's diapers, threw them in the laundry, hung up the laundry, and so on in an endless circle. Freddie laughed from the sofa, looking at his stepdaughter and turning to his wife. Kate, you're great. You made a fuss about giving birth when you were young. First she got a nanny and then a cradle. Even preparing for exams was not considered a valid reason for not doing some homework. Only once, when Emma's temperature rose above 39 degrees, was she mercifully allowed to undergo treatment. Ira now sided with Freddie in all disputes. With her tacit consent, the stepson could take something he liked from Emma's house or ask Emma for a sum of money even without a promise to give it back. And there was no question of Emma buying anything for herself without her own money. The mother-in-law generally treated the girl like an empty place or a servant, and when visiting, she never brought the girl a single apple. although despite the fact that he lived separately, she carried early fruits and sweets in bags to her adult grandson and her own granddaughter. Freddie then picked up the gifts intended for George and took them to his girlfriend's apartment. Simple-minded Anne, who from infancy saw Emma next to her much more often than her mother, treated her sister with the gifts she had received. But the girl didn't have the conscience to eat the child. In such conditions, Emma considered entering a pedagogical school on a budget to be a real miracle and made every effort not to be expelled from there. However, this became increasingly difficult. Another morning in the family began with a scandal. Mom shouted that it was time to get up and take her daughter to kindergarten. The girl resisted sluggishly. "Mom, but I can't do it today. I don't have the strength." Ask Freddie to take his own daughter, by the way, at least once. "Yesterday, after everyone else, I washed the dishes again. Only at 4 I printed the abstract. I have my second day today, so I can easily sleep longer and not trudge through the disgusting weather to this equally disgusting kindergarten." Emma also wanted to add that she actually didn't ask Anne's mother to give birth, but she bit her tongue just in time. It was not the girl's fault at all that the main concerns about her were dumped on her older sister. However, even without this phrase, a quarrel broke out. Kate screamed in unison with Freddie that she, Emma, was completely ungrateful and didn't remember any kindness at all. "By the way, it's me, you slacker, who feeds and sings." However, there was nothing unusual in these reproaches. Probably, if Emma had not been so tired, she would have remained silent, as happened most often. But everything just came together. Workload with studies, part-time work, household responsibilities, generously placed on her by the rest of the family, irritation from the invasion of a strange man's apartment, and lack of sleep formed an explosive mixture. The girl fell asleep from fatigue, as she was in her home sports suit, jumped up sharply and, standing in front of her stepfather, began to reprimand him for everything that had accumulated. "Something I don't see is that your highness is overworking. Your mother is carrying everything on herself, and it's getting to me too. I really love Anne, but Freddie, it's time for you to do something for your daughter." "Oh, drone, that's who you are." The girl instinctively dodged, noticing how her stepfather's palm was flying in her direction, deciding to slap her in the face. Walking past her mother and running out of the room, Emma found George in the corridor. Friends that the guy was just taking off his shoes and muttered in greeting, "Let me eat it. I haven't eaten since yesterday's lunch. She started a scandal with me out of the blue and didn't even let me go home. I've been staggering all night and my stomach is just cramping from hunger. Come on, get moving. March to the kitchen. By the way, what's the food today? It would be nice to have some soup. Do you have any candy for tea? If not, go to the store." Emma, already angry about the quarrel, did not stand on ceremony. "And what you brought with you is what you will eat." Ends of the hallway, where a new squabble threatened to flare up. Freddie has already come out. He asked his son, me, "Why did you show up without even warning?" "Where else should I go if you, my only relative, live here? In the gateway, perhaps to live. In short, you'll have to make room. Now I will live here too." Emma's mood was completely ruined. One could not even dream of going now and at least getting some more sleep or just relaxing. George will definitely start eating plates now, turn on the TV at full volume, laugh, and make belching sounds. The girl muttered. I'll take Anne to kindergarten," immediately grabbing a backpack with rags. Emma led her little sister to the kindergarten, answering the girl's numerous questions along the way. However, the girl thought in her mind, how will everything fit in the apartment now? Just in the walk-through room, which George seemed to have previously wanted to give away. Anne has settled down, but now she will have to free up the territory for her blood brother. It's somehow wrong to place a girl's bed next to her mother and stepfather. This means that she will have to make room because it is simply impossible to get into the college dormitory. With sadness, the girl thought about the man whom she had long considered her father. However, after his mother divorced him, Emma saw Andrew at most 5 times. And even then, somehow in a hurry while running, passing by, he handed her gifts and, without even really talking, moved. For more than a year now, he had not seen her at all. The last conversation on the phone was crumpled. As the girl understood, Andrew was trying to cope with a personal tragedy, loading himself with work beyond measure. Attempts to call him were unsuccessful, but there were no replies to the SMS sent. Probably, if Mom had kept quiet about the secret of her birth, everything would still be fine with them. Now the girl has to suffer for her mother's old sin. As expected, in the evening the furniture was rearranged in the apartment, And with Anne's bed, there was even less free space in the already small girl's room. But there was no other choice. The girl flatly refused to be accommodated in the walk-through room, which prompted a contemptuous remark from George. "Oh, you'd think someone would look at you." However, the guy was clearly lying. Emma noticed that he did not miss the opportunity to look at her unhindered. Since George moved into the apartment, the situation has gotten even worse. When no one was looking, the guy made obscene proposals to his stepsister, although he later reduced them to jokes. He hit the girl with slashes and slaps in the area below her back and laughed impudently in her face, noticing the fear in Emma's eyes. The girl repeatedly complained to her mother, who promised to deal with her stepson, but the conversation did not have any positive effect. George didn't care about Kate at all and, rolling his eyes, imagined the whole situation in such a way that it was naughty, but Emma who was pestering him. And Freddie, who was advised by his stepdaughter to reason with his son, began to defend him. "And you turn your sirloin smaller in front of George, also for me, depicting holy innocence." There is generally no place to test on modern girls. Emma realized that there would be no help from her mother, much less from her arrogant husband. Sometimes George went somewhere for several days. Only then did Emma sigh relatively calmly. One summer morning, Anne was taken to kindergarten by her mother, who needed to leave the house early so her eldest daughter could sleep a little longer, gaining strength before the last exam. However, Emma was in vain to rejoice at such luck, because while she was taking a shower, George opened the door to the bathroom in the most unceremonious manner, tearing out the latch on one side. Smirking, George said to his stepsister, hiding behind a translucent curtain, "Hey, move over. Or should we start with me rubbing your back?" Grabbing the first bottle she came across from the shelf, the girl threw it at the impudent man. It's unlikely that this could have scared him off, but someone rang the doorbell of the apartment demandingly. George muttered that he had been interrupted at the most interesting point and trudged off to see who had come. Emma hurriedly put on her robe and ran into the room to get dressed, but the strength of the door did not inspire confidence in the girl. And quickly getting dressed, she took pepper spray out of her backpack, deciding to use it without any warning if George got in her way. Without even drying her hair, she began to make her way to the exit. And fortunately, she did not meet her stepbrother. Judging by the sound of the water, he was in the bathroom. The girl was furious. She was running out of patience. Of course, she could change the protection to a stronger one, but she understood that this would not solve the main problem. She is defenseless in front of George, who does whatever he pleases. The girl did not intend to become a victim, so she planned a serious conversation for the evening. Having passed the last difficult exam scheduled for that day, even better than could have been expected after the stress experienced in the morning, and thus closing the summer session, Emma was glad that at least this problem was behind her. As agreed, the girl followed her sister into the kindergarten, and on the way home she was thinking about how to start a conversation with all the inhabitants of the apartment. The girl didn't want her little sister to witness the scandal, but she could be sent to the nursery to watch cartoons. What child would refuse? Meanwhile, she will put before everyone the main question that George living in the apartment is in no way acceptable. After Anne rushed off to the nursery, Emma asked to stay in the kitchen for Freddie, who was about to go to Emma's favorite sofa in front of the TV. George clearly did not expect that Emma would dare to talk about his morning prank and immediately began to make excuses. "I didn't know that the bathroom was occupied." It was obvious that he was lying, and the girl blushed with indignation. Oh, what a dunno. Didn't the fact that the water was on and the bathroom door was closed from the inside tell you anything? Why are you lying? The girl sighed in order to calm down at least a little, keep an even tone of voice and not scare Anne with her scream, and she continued. "In general, George, I can't stay under the same roof with you. Nothing good will come of it. With Mom and Freddie, you still somehow play the role of a simpleton. But as soon as you and I are alone, how do you behave?" It was noticeable that George was nervous, but was trying to find an excuse. How serious you are. I just wanted a joke. Just think, beauty. Do you even look at yourself in the mirror? I won't have any reaction to your appearance. A liter of wine won't be enough to make you want to look at you. Emma was not affected by her stepbrother's ridicule, and she gave her mother an ultimatum. You can't live like this any longer. I am very concerned about George's behavior. Mom, in short, either you kick him out or I'm leaving. Betty had been silent before, but intervened in the conversation. No, so go away. Get down on all four sides. You provoked George yourself. As the saying goes, it is true that if the dog doesn't want to, then the dog won't jump up either. It wasn't enough for you to accuse him of committing any illegal actions. Come on, get lost. There is no point in throwing mud at my son here. Emma was offended not so much because of her stepfather's words, but because her mother didn't even think to protect her. Kate was silent. She generally acted as if she had already talked about this topic with Freddie for a long time and decided everything was not in favor of her daughter. Mom, why are you silent? What, you can't even say a word in defense of your daughter, whom your husband is now insulting? Or do you also think that I'm provoking? Or is the presence of pants in the house more important to you with what will happen to your daughter even with two? Anne is also in danger. You never know what will hit this George in the head. She is small, and he will generally be able to cope with her. Freddie got furious. You rubbish. Keep your filthy tongue shut. Once again, I hear such suspicions towards George, and you'll instantly fly out of the apartment. From her stepfather's impudence. Emma was even confused for a few moments. She had no decent words. And then she, trying not to scream, asked, "Is it okay that this is my mother's apartment and I am registered here? How am I going to fly out of here? Maybe you and your youngest will liberate the territory. It's high time for George to join the army. But you made a fuss, somehow got him off. And now this slacker is groping me out of excess strength. So let him get out of here before I break his empty head. When will he pinch me again or dirty me with his eyes? Let this precious one go to his apartment, which is for rent, or, in the end, let him rent. Better yet, both drones, get out of here." Kate did not know how to extinguish the conflict that had broken out in the family and asked, "Let us all calm down, and tomorrow we will calmly decide everything." Emma was unpleasant about her mother's attitude, but she was so tired of arguing and fighting for her right to live in safety that she didn't even wash the dishes, as her stepfather tried to order, and went to bed. Emma had gloomy premonitions. Judging by my mother's behavior, she is not going to drive any of the men away. This means she will have to leave. Okay, at least the session is left behind. You can, as an option, ask to go to a children's camp somewhere, even if not as a counselor, as long as she doesn't stay here in her home apartment where she no longer feels at ease. There was no sleep in either eye when she heard someone approach the room. From the creaking of the floors, the girl realized that the person on the other side of the door was trampling. Apparently, he listens to understand whether the girls are sleeping or not. It seems that the situation did not arouse any suspicion. The door handle slid down, and in the opening the girl made out the silhouette of George. He walked towards her bed and almost jumped when Emma's quiet voice rang out. "If you take another step in my direction, I will wake up the whole house. You will explain what you are doing in the girl's bedroom." He also answered in a whisper, "It scared me. I'll think something." The stepbrother was approaching, and Emma, without hesitation, screamed. She screamed at the top of her lungs, as if freeing herself from accumulated irritation and anger. The girl no longer cared. She was not stopped by the fact that the awakened Anne and the neighbor downstairs, a not quite adequate bilious man, knocked on the radiator. Emma did not stop screaming even when her mother and stepfather appeared in the room. The girl fell silent only when Kate splashed a glass of water on her younger daughter's nightstand in her face. This did not calm the girl down, but made her cough from the liquid that got into her mouth. Anne came in crying. Kate reprimanded Emma about her selfishness and bad upbringing, but the girl didn't care. Under this terrible cacophony, Emma hastily collected her things. "I won't stay here for a second longer. I seriously doubt that George showed up here in the middle of the night to ask for forgiveness. In general, Mom, I wouldn't expect you to pay for your share in this apartment or completely remove this bastard from my field of vision." Freddie looked with clearly discernible anger first at George, then at his furious stepdaughter, and did not react at all to his daughter. Kate, clutching her head, went to get some medicine, reporting to nowhere. "Lord, what kind of disgusting thing is it to organize a material showdown in the middle of the night? I need to take a sedative." Emma sat down next to Anne, stroked her head, said goodbye, and passing by the kitchen, where her mother was sitting at the table, reminded her, "I'm waiting for a call as soon as possible. I'll come for the rest of the things later. I hope everything will be safe." The girl was shaking with anger, but she stubbornly walked to the station to go to the only person who could help her. In the waiting room, Emma opened a notebook for secrets, which it seems was given to her by her neighbor in either the 3rd or 4th grade. and I found the entry among the pages of the desired one. Andrew wrote this line a long time ago, when the girl still had what she thought was a strong, happy family, and said that this was his mother's name and her address. The man promised that one day they would all go to visit her to try to overcome past differences. The girl got her bearings and bought a ticket to the station closest to the one she needed. Judging by the information, we would have to walk about 4 kilometers, but this was not what confused Emma. She thought hard about what to say to Jane and how to introduce herself to her. Your son's ex-daughter, your ex-daughter-in-law's daughter, Andrew's friend, the one he considered his daughter for a long time. The girl looked through the options, but could not find the perfect one. But getting to the destination turned out to be as easy as shelling piers. And soon Emma was already standing at the fence with a sign attached to it with the desired address. The girl did not dare introduce herself to the woman in a tracksuit who was clearing the front garden of weeds. And apparently, it was Jane. And just ask, "Hello, can I see Andrew?" The girl did not even imagine that completely harmless phrases could produce such an effect. The woman threw herself on the ground and began to howl like a wounded animal. Emma hesitated only for a few seconds, and then, throwing her things, opened the gate and ran up to the woman. "No, Jane, get up. How can I help you?" The crying woman did not immediately begin to calm down, and only after a few minutes, Emma was able to lift her from the ground and bring her to a bench under a tree. Jane blew her nose noisily into a rag she took out of her pocket and ordered, "From home, bring me a mug of water and pills from the refrigerator." Emma ran into the house and, having quickly found all the necessary medicines, rushed to look for a mug when she noticed a photo of Andrew on the table with a black ribbon at an angle. The girl felt sad to the point of tears. She sniffled. Andrew was the only person whom the girl considered a father. And although due to Kate's fault, the relationship between the imaginary relatives was destroyed, Emma still missed him. She now understood what caused such a violent reaction from Jane, and was completely at a loss how to explain who she was and why she had come, so as not to torment the heart of the poor woman who had lost her son even more. If it weren't for the girl bringing Jane pills and water, and when she took the medicine, she asked, "Maybe we should call the doctors." Jane Ivanovna shook her head, and then wiped her eyes from tears and began to study the uninvited guest. The look in her eyes suddenly became prickly and angry. The woman painfully poked Emma in the stomach and began to accuse, "It's your fault that you and your mother are walking. They killed my son. Do you live happily ever after? Oh, you're a reptile. You weren't even embarrassed to come here to see me. Yes, if it weren't for your demon mother, you wouldn't have fooled my son. Now I know for sure he would be living with some worthy woman. I immediately told him, as soon as I saw you a newborn, that Kate is rubbish and is someone else's child and is trying to tie him to herself. Didn't listen. And this is the result. He crashed his car, and it was as if he had never existed in the world. He didn't even leave me a granddaughter or grandson. They buried the damp earth, and that's all. There was Andrew. He is not there. Only the grave remains. Get out of my yard no matter what you came for. My eyes wouldn't see you." The woman, breathing heavily, rose from the bench and began to advance on the guest, showering her with choice abuse. Emma muttered an apology that Jane didn't seem to even hear, and ran out of the yard, picking up her things thrown by the fence. The girl decided to visit Andrew's last shelter. Still, she could not perceive him as a stranger. She saw where the cemetery was when she walked to the house, and it was not difficult to find the grave of the son of such a hostess who was so angry with her, a simple cross with a photograph and a plaque with 2 dates. That's all that's left of Andrew. Emma, as if all restrictions had been removed from her, began to tell everything that tormented her in front of the grave. Tears flowed down her cheeks, and she kept complaining. "Daddy, I don't know what to do at all. I need to look for housing because my heart feels that my mother is not going to exchange the apartment. I don't want to huddle there with these people. And it's just a pity. But not only can I help her, I can't help myself either." Of course, Emma did not expect that inspiration would descend on her in the graveyard and she would understand how to act further. But after talking out loud about my misadventures and sobbing, wistful emptiness set in. Having said goodbye, Emma came in from the side and, holding out her hand, stroked the photo of Andrew. "Goodbye, and don't be offended if I can't come for a long time." Emma wandered back. There were logs piled up near a fence near some house, and the girl decided to find out if there was any live-in work in the town next to the village. She took out her phone and became despondent. The smart device, the first assistant of a modern person, was completely discharged. Even without this trouble, my nerves were on edge. And although Emma thought she had no more tears left, she burst into tears again. The girl did not notice anything around, not even the buzzing of mosquitoes trying to sting unprotected parts of the body. Emma almost jumped when a mocking male voice was heard above her head. "Pearl, have you decided to build a pond here? But this is no good. We specially stacked the logs here for wiretapping, but here you are silent about them. Get up and come with me." Emma raised her head, wiped away her tears, and looked at a handsome man of about 25 years old standing in front of her. The stranger extended his hand to her. "Well, what kind of tragedy happened?" Emma did not share the details with the man and blamed her tears on her dead phone. "If you have a charger, then this is not a problem. My house is behind you. There will be a free socket. Let's go too." The man extended his hand to the girl, but Emma did not dare trust the stranger. "Ted, he ate you." A woman walking down the street shouted. "Who is sitting under our fence?" "Ted is me, and this is my mother coming." Judging by the bags, the evening bus arrived and the driver and sister gave us gifts. "I'll run now, I'll meet my mother, but don't go anywhere. We'll solve the problem with your phone." Emma had nowhere to go. Without the information support of her smartphone, she felt too insecure, and suddenly afraid that she might have forgotten the charger during her hasty preparations. The girl opened her bag and began to look for it. To my great joy, I had it with me. Emma exhaled. Now all that remains is to find a place with an outlet. She could try a local store, but she had no idea what hours they were open until, having taken the bags from his mother, walked first and, hugging the girl, asks, "Well, now aren't you afraid to go into the house? We won't be alone." Emma replied, "I'm not afraid, but it's probably not very convenient." "No. Come on. What's your name, by the way? Otherwise, my mother won't understand that I'm taking an unfamiliar girl into the house so easily." "Emma. Well, it's very nice. Take your things and follow me. You will meet your mother at the house. Otherwise, I see that you have already been bitten by mosquitoes." Ted put his bags on the floor in the kitchen and started charging his phone. "But it seems to be blinking. Now you have to wait a little, and then you can turn it on and use it." "Thank you." Emma began to thank, but didn't have time to finish. The mistress of the house appeared in the kitchen, breathing noisily. Looking carefully at the guest, she rested her hands on her wide sides and asked her son, "Ted, is this girl not one of ours? Explain who this is. Did you meet at our house or what?" "Mom, this is Emma." "Emma, this is my mother, Mary." The woman frowned. "I needed to see Andrew." Emma paused to control her emotions and continued, "Unfortunately, I was late." Mary turned to Ted. "No, this is not my own daughter. She complained at the bus stop. She says she came, gave me a heart attack and left somewhere." But couldn't resist making an ironic remark. If my aunt had a heart attack, well, would she not go to the first aid station, but go to the bus stop? Are there any alternative methods of treatment practiced there? Mary, as if not noticing the guest, answered her son. "Oh, Ted, you just need to be sarcastic." She wanted to pull this girl by her hair. She said that she regretted that she didn't give her mother a kick in the ass. When Andrew brought her to the house to meet her, the mother immediately guessed that her son would be unhappy with this woman. That's how it happened. But do you remember what kind of city he returned from a few years ago? They put it in a coffin, honestly. The women said that he brought almost nothing with him. He left everything to his wife and not his own daughter, this Emma. Betchins. They say that Kate cheated on him even in marriage. Bless you. Van wins. "Mom, you know that I try not to listen to gossip." Mary waved her hand and turned to the girl to satisfy her Emma experience. "Where have you been?" "She sat here under our fence the whole time." "Why didn't you go straight to the station?" Emma replied. "I went to the churchyard. You may not believe it, but I really feel sorry for Dad. I never knew another father. It was he who wiped my tears. When I got bad grades at school, he gave me my first bouquet of flowers and carried me on his shoulders. I even braided my hair when my mother had no time. It's not easy to immediately lose such family relationships. I sat on the grave and didn't even notice how much time I spent there." Her heart trembled, but she asked, "Why did you stop at our house where I could sit down?" "I stopped there. I'm sorry I bothered you. Now the phone will charge a little, and I will leave." Ted smiled. "And where are you going to go at night?" "A young and beautiful girl is hardly worth taking risks." "Mom, let's make Emma sleep on the sofa in the summer kitchen. It's warm now and she won't freeze. I can take her tomorrow morning." Mary was indignant. That is, you don't have time to go to your aunt and pick up the transmitter, and how to go for a ride with a girl. So for the sweet soul, although by the way, it's not dark yet, you can pick berries, peas and strawberries today and radishes and onions tomorrow morning. It will be fresher. You will take everything to your aunt. Let him sell it. Now the first greens, the berries are expensive. The woman turned her gaze to Emma and demand. In general, while your phone is charging, let's go. Will you help me? I need to rest before I go on the road tomorrow morning. Although picking small berries was not the most common thing for Emma, she coped with the task quite quickly. Slowly but surely, the cups were filled with ripe berries. As Mary ordered, Emma did not fill them to the top and put them in a box with cells. When the two bushes were freed from their burden, Mary called to the girl, "Come." When Emma approached, the woman outlined a new area of work for her. "Here, look, the pea blades are neat and not all in a row. Oh, and I also need to give you a bed." Emma nodded. She herself wanted to at least somehow thank the people who decided to shelter her. The girl did not feel the strength to go somewhere right now. It was necessary to have at least a short respite after the earlier harvest had been harvested. Mary invited both her son and her guest to the table. Only at that moment, when the girl smelled potatoes stewed with meat, did she realize that all day she had been refreshed only by pastries and soda at the station. Trying not to look hungry, Emma started eating. However, she was prevented from completely relaxing by the attentive, searching glances that Ted threw at her. The man really liked the girl. Slender, modest, it was clear that she did not have a nasty character. Besides, went with his mother to the garden without any problems. And she didn't even express her dissatisfaction with a gesture. And this despite the fact that it was obvious. The girl was clearly a city girl, unaccustomed to fresh air. There he sits as if after tea, almost asleep. But the conversation that her mother has with her, asking about her life, supports her. Ted didn't listen much to the dialogue. But he even felt sorry for the guest who ended up being interrogated instead of dinner, and he decided to end the torment of the unfortunate woman. "Mom, we are leaving early tomorrow. The guest has already made her bed linen. Otherwise, he simply won't be able to wake up on time tomorrow." Emma, who was really very tired both physically and mentally, looked at the man with gratitude. And Ted realized that he wanted the girl to always look at him like that. He liked her more and more every minute. In the morning, Ted drove Emma to the district center, and getting ready to park near his aunt's house, asked the girl, "Nee, listen, did you head further to your native land or what?" The girl shrugged. "Don't know. Still need to think. My way home is blocked. I'll probably look for a place in some children's institution. Of course, I don't have a diploma yet, but I do have my record book with me. Maybe someone would take pity on the student. I need a vacancy with accommodation." He'd slapped his forehead and say, "Listen, how come I didn't think of it right away? Now let's go to my aunt's together. Maybe she will need an assistant for the summer season. She lives in the apartment alone." So Emma ended up in a small town 100 kilometers from her hometown with Aunt Ellen. The apartment was decorated in a minimalist style, and the girl did not feel very comfortable in it. After a short introduction, the hostess asked Emma to sit in the kitchen, and she and her nephew went into the back room and asked, "Well, why did you bring this girl here for me? By the way, I have a decent apartment. Your mother already called me and warned me that you might not come alone. And with this one, which our Andrew raised for so many years as his own." The nephew was spared the need to tell the woman the situation. "That's it. You won't be alone." And grimaced, "No, Ted. I don't understand who I can't trust. After all, trade is such a thing. Moreover, this girl's mother and I have our own scores to settle. You were very little when Andrew brought this FIFA to the village to show, although before that he wanted to marry me, by the way. How can I live in the same apartment with the daughter of this impudent woman? This Emma has a rotten family. So, nephew, I'm sorry, I tried to convince his aunt, but it seems children are not responsible for the sins of their fathers. More precisely, in this case, mothers are not responsible. Emma looks quite adequate. So I think you won't regret it. Don't even try to persuade me. Do you want to help this girl? Give him money to go home and let him settle down somewhere in his big city. There are also higher salaries." And the hostess and her nephew entered the kitchen, and Helen said bluntly, "I'm sorry, but I have my own personal life, and your presence would be out of place. And I don't need helpers. As they say, I can handle everything myself." However, Ted did not want to part with the beautiful Emma, and he feverishly thought about how to get her phone number. Much to the man's surprise, The girl was not upset at all, but was even happy. It's very good that it's not necessary. I was looking through advertisements on my phone for a special boarding house, which somewhere, judging by the map here in the area, a cleaner is needed. It's not a very prestigious profession, of course, but I won't give up. In addition, accommodation and meals are provided, just a fabulous offer. The only negative is that, as the smartphone suggested, there is no public transport to this boarding house, so I had to order a taxi. In general, a wild number appeared on the screen. I just ask you to lend me some money to get there. As soon as I receive my first salary, I will transfer it to you immediately. No. What if you suddenly come there, look, and don't like it? Let me take it to you. I'll wait to make sure everything is fine, and only then will I leave. Helen, who involuntarily heard this dialogue taking place in her kitchen, was not too surprised by her nephew. Ted has always been very empathetic, from early childhood. I remember that at the age of 6, he brought a girl from a neighboring street to his home and said that this was his fiancée who would live with him. He also had several girls at school. At least 3 girls cried for him, but he grew old and, after serving, returned to the village with his bride. She, however, could not live like this for long under the yoke of the Midge and left for her homeland without waiting for the wedding march. As far as Helen knew, Ted was not at all upset about the failed marriage. It seems that he even breathed a sigh of relief and continued to lead a completely unmonastic lifestyle. And now the woman noticed a familiar spark of excitement in her nephew's eyes. The hunter has already had his eye on his next victim. Perhaps this poor fellow should have been warned, but Helen chose not to interfere. First of all, Emma was clearly of age, based on what the woman knew. Secondly, she has her own scores to settle with this person's mother. Thirdly, Helen knew her nephew. If he wants to get a girl, then he will get her. So let them do whatever they want, just don't touch her. Ted gallantly opened the car door for Emma, and Helen, watching the couple from the window, realized that the naive-looking young lady would have practically no chance to resist. The woman's instincts and experience did not disappoint. Ted had really managed to win Emma over, although, of course, he had to try. Basically, the thoughts of the girl, who was hired for seasonal work in a boarding house, were occupied with the problem of housing. Emma called her mother to find out how she was going to solve the pressing housing issue, but Kate asked to give her more time. Almost every time she answered the same phone. No, daughter, it's not that simple. We only have a 2-room apartment in a residential area of the city and not a mansion on the main street. If you arrange an exchange for 2 apartments, then nothing good will come of it. Mom, why did you decide to change our apartment? Think about the fact that this is your marriage home. If you decide to exchange it and then buy another apartment, then your hubby will be able to claim part of it if something happens. It seems to me that the easiest way is to move George into the apartment that his father rents out. From the silence that hung on the phone for a few seconds, Emma guessed that there was some problem that she didn't know about and asked directly, "Mother, just answer me honestly, what's wrong with your Freddie's apartment? Does he even have one? Or has he been lying to you all these years?" Erker sighed and admitted. Freddie had an apartment, but he had to urgently sell it in order to save George from prison. It turned out that Helga threw him out of her home and life for a reason. Freddie didn't tell me everything in detail, but the story could not have ended well for George. It's good that the injured party agreed not to contact the police, and the matter was settled peacefully. In general, this is the situation, daughter. Emma constantly tried to convey to her mother the idea that a person who had to buy freedom at the price of an apartment could be dangerous. Mom, do you understand that you are putting yourself and Anne in danger? Obviously, this George didn't pick flowers from a flower bed or took change from other people's pockets. It turns out he committed a rather serious crime. And Daddy, work hard. Instead of allowing his son to go where he belonged, he sold the apartment and paid off fair retribution. Well, okay, Freddie is not afraid of his offspring, but why do you allow George to be with you, Anne, under the same roof? Let him work, rent an apartment for himself, preferably further away. Emma was not so much tired from the work, which, to be honest, was a lot, but from the constant persuasion. She couldn't convince her mother to change her mind and push her to block George's access to the apartment. The only outlet for the girl was communication with Dima. The man came to see her every weekend, and sometimes on weekdays. During meetings, he showered me with compliments and brought various sweets and natural village products. The fewer days remained until the end of the last shift, the more worried Emma became. Without even knowing what to do, the decisive factor was one of the conversations with Dima. who, hugging her tightly, whispered in her ear, "Oh, Emma, my Emma, she just bewitched me. How will I live without you? I don't even know. Let's transfer to correspondence and move in with me. I will be lost without you. I will wither away. I understand that you are all so lofty and Emma was silent, but she liked the idea of moving. She herself felt that Emma had fallen into this man who cared so much about her. Besides, if she accepts the invitation, she won't have to return to her mother's apartment and look at the disgusting faces of Freddie and his offspring. Of course, it will take longer to study in absentia, but it will be possible to live with Emma's loved one, even without formalizing the relationship. While the girl was thinking, Ted whispered, "Don't think so. I'm not just suggesting you come and live. I understand that this is probably important to you. Just a little before the wedding happens, you will come to me. That's all." Emma looked Ted in the eye to make sure he was serious. As if sensing a shadow of doubt, confirmed, "Yes, I propose to you to get married. You usually have to wait a month from the moment you submit your application until it is signed. But this means practically nothing. You will live as a wife from the very first day Emma crossed the threshold of the house." She was spinning in a whirlpool of happy worries. The mother did not feel joy that her son brought Emma home as a bride, hearing laughter from Ted's room. Lehman frowned with disgust and quietly whispered, "They are having fun. If only they were ashamed of it." They decided to have the wedding on seemingly neutral territory, near which Emma spent the summer. The bride, who already knew that she had become pregnant by Emma Ted, did not want a large celebration and was glad that her future mother-in-law supported her. "Oh, but now it's no longer fashionable to gather the whole village." "Yes, and that's correct. The money that would be wasted on food and drink would be better spent on something useful. The car needs to be replaced, the roof needs to be patched, and you should buy a bed that's not so squeaky." Mary couldn't resist mocking. As a result, Emma invited only her mother and Anne to sit in a modest cafe. Under no circumstances did she want to see Freddie and George at the table on a holiday. From the groom's side, only his mother came. Aunt Helen flatly refused to participate in the celebration. Both Ted, privy to the long history with Andrew, and the bride's mother understood why. Anne sat on her lap for almost the entire lunch. When, after modest gatherings, the bride's relatives and the newlyweds and their mother had to go in different directions, the girl even cried. Emma also began to cry. In general, she had difficulty controlling her emotions and nerves. After a month of living there, the restless Mary's nerves were stretched to the limit. The woman literally did not allow me to lie down and rest. All she had for Emma was to work in the garden and greenhouse, roll up jars with the harvest, cook and clean the house. Everything had to be done by the bride. He, of course, helped as much as possible. But Mary, noticing, for example, her son peeling onions for preparation, almost cursed him out of the kitchen. "What did you come up with? Do women's work, go out and do men's?" If life was not sweet for the unfortunate young woman in her mother's apartment, then here in general, she sometimes wanted to howl like a wolf. Mary stole almost everything. When Emma spoke about her pregnancy and that it was difficult for her to tolerate certain smells due to toxicosis, her mother-in-law went completely wild. Left alone with her daughter-in-law, Mary began to raise the young woman. "Don't pretend in front of me. Why wasn't I pregnant? You know, they used to give birth in the field and nothing happened. They were all strong." Emma didn't have the strength to argue or prove anything. She almost constantly wanted to sleep. From a cheerful and active beauty, she turned into an amorphous creature with bags under her eyes. Emma understood that the pregnancy was not proceeding at all the way her mother went with Anne, and she was scared. She once complained to Ted, "Irene from your paramedic midwife center told me that swelling is a variant of the norm. When I began to say that on the internet, it was advised to conduct an additional examination for such symptoms." She openly cursed me. "I'm afraid Irene is being too careless about what I tell her. My symptoms are not the best. Take me to the antenatal clinic, at least in the nearest city." Hearing this, Mary could not stand it. "Yes, our Irene has as much experience as you are. Since she said that you have a normal variant, that means it is so." "That's right. She sent you. The simulator." The lady spoke on her head. "If you don't trust Irene, go. The bus runs twice a day. You'll leave in the morning, come back in the evening, and Ted won't have to travel around, and the budget will remain the same. You didn't bring a penny into the house, but you're still trying to ride into heaven on our backs." Having shown concern in this way, the future grandmother went to one of her friends, and Emma, left alone with her husband, began to persuade. Ted, please, let's take me to the regional center. I feel that no amount of dill can help my condition. Why take the risk? The man could, but the woman somewhere on the cheek and promised, okay, I'll think of something. However, in the morning, when Emma woke up, her husband was no longer there. The woman got dressed and looked out into the car yard. The husband was also not there, and Mary Vasilievna was busy in the front garden. Me. Good morning, greeted Emma's mother-in-law. Do you happen to know when Ted will be back? Else, without looking up from what she was doing, Mary answers. By the evening, Helen will probably have some kind of incident at work. And he rushed there to help. It became so offensive that tears flowed from my eyes. Why didn't her husband wake her up? Although he knew that she needed to go to the regional center, she would get ready in an instant. More precisely, she had everything already prepared for attending the consultation. Having filled a bottle of water, Emma took her bag and, trying to calm down, headed to the gate. Are you going far? I need to collect carrots. Otherwise, according to the forecast, there will be a ton of rain next week. The mother-in-law's voice came from behind the woman. When you sit down at the table, you are in the first row, and how to help, you run from the yard. Emma turned around and, not holding back her tears, answered, I need to go to the hospital, where Ted, by the way, could very well have dropped me off. Or did you specifically dissuade him from leaving alone? And I was fiddling with carrots. Very thoughtful of you. Mary was angry. Oh, that's how you spoke. Here you have warmed up the snake, you impudent freeloader. Emma did not listen to what other insults her mother-in-law would come up with and headed to the bus stop so as not to miss the bus. The woman managed to get a paid appointment with a doctor only around lunchtime. As Emma assumed, additional tests were ordered, which they also could not take from her for free. However, the fairly young doctor conducting the appointment advised me, of course, I have no right to force you to urgently run and get tested at a paid center. However, when I was in your place, that's exactly what I did. Now I have a 5-year-old son thanks to the timely diagnosis of the problem and correctly prescribed treatment. It's scary to think what would have happened if everything had been different. Emma thanked the doctor and, leaving the consultation building, called her husband. Ted, I'm in the center now. Please, I'm coming. I may not have enough money because I still need to take paid tests. The doctor wasn't particularly frightening, but it seems there's no point in delaying it since I'm already here. That man did not consider it necessary to apologize for leaving in the morning without his wife, and was even indignant. Do you know where I can get this money? Am I printing them, do you think? Emma, hearing women's laughter and squeals in the background, as if someone was tickling someone, was so surprised that she even ignored her husband's rudeness. Ted, your mom said that you went to help your aunt, and you were having fun somewhere. How do we understand this in general? However, instead of an answer, beeps were heard from the phone. Upon further attempts to call Ted, the woman heard that the subscriber was unavailable. In the paid laboratory, a charming girl filling out documents asked if Emma had eaten, made a discount, and after drawing blood, she even poured hot tea and offered cookies. Emma, embarrassed, asked how much tea and cookies would cost, and the girl laughed merrily. What are you talking about? Everything is free. There are vases of more candy. True, they are tiny but very tasty. Take it, don't be shy. Emma modestly took a few things, and having learned that the next day the results would already be sent to the specified email, thanked Emma's girl, who showed much more concern for her than her mother-in-law and husband. As soon as the woman came out into the air, Ted calls, "No, tell me where to go." "I am free." Emma gave the address, and soon she was driving with her husband towards his village. The tired woman did not want to cause a scandal, and as a gesture of goodwill, she offered him some candy. "Try me now in the laboratory," the girl from the reception treated me. The man, who was expecting a showdown, realized that the threat of a quarrel had passed and ate the sweet with pleasure. But Mary, as soon as Ted and Emma crossed the threshold of the house, began to throw thunder and lightning. Son, this is just a disgrace. Okay, you left to help Helen. It's a holy thing to never abandon a relative in trouble, but after you, this one also drove off to an unknown destination." Emma indignantly tried to defend herself. "Actually, I told you and Ted that I was going to the regional hospital. By the way, I care about your grandson's health. The doctor said that tests need to be done and that swelling like mine is not normal." And elderly woman chuckled. "These doctors just want to extract more money from simpletons. And in general, it is still unknown whose child you are carrying. I probably slept with half the boarding house staff. And you want to send it to Ted. Do you think your mother pulled off such a trick? And everything will go smoothly for you. Ted, get her out of my sight and immediately. Since you found her under the fence, let her go there. That's the place for your woman to walk. You will still find a good woman. And the sooner you remove this from your life, the better. Look, Andrew got confused with her mother. So what's the result? He lies quietly in the graveyard while Jane sheds tears. She is too soft and was unable to immediately return her son to her side. So I was left alone without support in my old age. I don't wish such a fate for you or myself. Emma's eyes darkened at such words from her mother-in-law, trying not to faint to the delight of her mother-in-law's gloating. The woman, slowly, leaning on the wall, began to move towards the bedroom. There were no tears, just pure fear caused by an unusual sensation. Her stomach was twisting somehow strangely, but Emma, with her feminine instinct, understood that it was not from hunger. Carefully, trying not to make sudden movements, she began to fold her. A few minutes later, Ted came into the room and began to persuade. Emma, why are you freaking out? Just think, Mom got excited. She doesn't really think so. Mom herself is now sitting in the kitchen, worried, drinking drops from her heart. Emma raised her head and looked at her husband. That's it, Ted. I've had enough of this family life. You know, when I had to run away from my home, I firmly promised myself that I would never tolerate insults. But for some reason, until today, I have repeatedly broken my vow. But that's not even the worst thing. I am terribly offended that you can never say a word in my defense. I should not have believed that I could become happy. As soon as Emma said these words, another painful spasm ran through her. In a dull voice, the woman ordered to get dressed. I feel bad, take me to the hospital. Mary, who, as it turned out, was not sitting in the kitchen but was eavesdropping on the couple's conversation, butted at me. Why are you pushing my son around? He has just arrived and must take you somewhere again. I won't let you in. By God, I won't let you in. Emma, realizing that arguing with her mother-in-law could be fatal, was already dialing the emergency number to call an ambulance. The 45 minutes while the doctors were driving became the longest in the woman's life. Sometimes the pain would go away for a while, and then she would continue to pack her things. When my insides again curled into a tight spring, I moved to a computer chair, leaned back and tried, despite the desire to curl up sideways, to completely relax and breathe calmly and measuredly. Ted defied his mother and volunteered to accompany his wife to the hospital. Mary only managed to insist that her son ride not in his own car but in an ambulance, waking up after anesthesia. Emma felt terrible thirst and dizziness. Vision gradually became clearer, but the woman, looking around her life, saw empty beds in the corners like gray shadows. Emma blinked hard and, opening her eyes, noted with satisfaction they had disappeared. Gradually the sounds returned. The woman heard someone walking along the corridor. Somewhere nearby an elevator was making noise. Considering all sorts of devices that came into view, the specific smell of medicines and detergents, Emma concluded that the assumption turned out to be correct. Soon a woman in a medical uniform entered, softened her lips with wet cotton wool and greedy. Welcome back. How are you feeling? Nothing. I'm just very dizzy, Emma answered hoarsely. But it's normal. Narcosis is the thing. What is your name? Do you remember? Emma. Wonderful name. Well, let's watch you here a little longer and then go to the room. You will have to stay under the supervision of a doctor for several days, and then home. Excuse me, please, but what about my child? Emma asked the most important question, but received a very evasive answer. I'm just an anesthesiologist. The doctor will tell you everything in detail, don't worry. Emma nodded, causing everything to blur before her eyes, and it was as if she had fallen into a viscous, unnatural dream. After waking up again, she felt much better, although perhaps I wanted to drink even more. Before the woman had time to press the call button, a nurse came for her with a gurney. Well, my dear, let's slowly come here like this, sideways, carefully. Now I'll take you to the ward. Emma was worried about the child. As soon as the doctor approached her and began asking questions about her well-being, the woman quietly asked, "How is my child?" Everything became clear from Emma's downcast eyes, as through the thickness of the water some terms reached her that she did not understand. At the end of the explanation, the doctor spoke words of consolation. Operation was successfully completed. You will certainly be able to become a mother after the recovery period, of course. Everyone, rest. In the evening, be sure to come to the treatment room for an injection. The doctor left, and overcoming the urge to scream, Emma noticed her bag. Reaching out her hand, the woman took out the phone and dialed her husband's number. Ted, listen to me and don't worry. Collect all my things and bring them to me at the hospital when I am discharged. I will inform you about the date and time later. Let's stop by, file for divorce, and you can be completely free. The man tried to say something, but Emma did not listen to him. The woman now considered escaping from her home, transferring to correspondence education, and insulting her mother-in-law to be completely insignificant events compared to loss of a child. Now Emma has decided to return to the apartment where Freddie and his son have settled and kicked them out. Whether mom likes it or not, they didn't want it in a good way, so we'll be in a right way. We still need to find out what crime George committed in order to expose this bastard. But this is after my head stopped spinning so hellishly. Instead of a few days in the hospital, she had to stay for a week, but Emma had time to think about everything. She rejected calls from her mother-in-law without accepting them. And when Mary tried to talk to her daughter-in-law from her son's phone, she cut off her lamentations. You know what? Go under the fence yourself. And don't call me anymore. Berta did everything Emma asked and didn't even try to talk her out of divorce. Only when he dropped the woman off near the station, he asked, Emma, don't be angry with me and Mom. She didn't want this to happen. This is all a fatal accident. The woman didn't answer and didn't even slam the car door, although she really wanted to. Emma did not warn her mother about her return. And upon entering, I was surprised that there was no one in the apartment. On the one hand, this was very pleasing, but on the other, it was already almost 11 p.m., and Anne definitely had to be at home with someone. There was relative order in the bedroom that Emma shared with her younger sister, considering that there is a little girl living there. But in the other rooms, the woman noticed traces that looked like hasty preparations. Emma headed to the kitchen and automatically looked into the refrigerator. I was amazed that it was almost empty, so I put the kettle on. And then Mom and Anne entered the apartment. Oh, daughter. Kate was delighted. I'm so glad to see you, and grabbed her older sister by the legs and began to persuade her. Don't leave anymore. Emma crouched down to hug the girl and began to calm her down. Everything is fine. I won't go anywhere else. Later, when Emma read a book to her sister and the girl fell asleep, Kate apologized to her daughter. May forgive me for everything. I'm sorry, you turned out to be right. Freddie and George got into bad business. Now they are in prison. An old crime committed by George was also revealed. The two women sat in the kitchen for a long time, shedding tears into their tea. And then Emma suggested, Mom, let's sell this apartment and move somewhere far away. There are too many unpleasant memories here. Kate agreed. Soon, the mother and two daughters settled in a city 300 kilometers from their homeland. Emma transferred to a local university. I also met a nice single neighbor at the entrance. She no longer believed in the lightning-fast Emma and agreed to marry Pablo only a few years later. Kate, who, having married Freddie, ruined the lives of many close people, completely devoted herself to caring for Milana and the twins born to Emma and her husband.